but Grunkle, Stan, probably has.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for joining us for the December 10th, 2019 meeting of the Hendersonville Board of Mayor and Aldermen. We're going to begin our meeting as we typically do, and that's with a prayer and pledge. So please stand and join with me, and continue standing after we finish our prayer. Please bow your heads with me. Dear Lord, thank you for bringing us together, and thank you for the opportunity to serve you tonight. Thank you for the opportunity to serve you all the time. And thank you for the people who protect us, those who protect us here and those who protect us far away. And thank you for this day, the type of day that only you can create, that reminds us that we have seasons, and we have rain, and we have flowers, and we have food. And thank you for the wonderful activities you provide for us, and thank you for the wonderful city that you provide for us. Please help us to do your work and use your wisdom that you've given us. Help us to use that tonight, and help us to use it as we go from here. And please especially look after a couple of your children, Patty Clary, Jim Fuquay, and Virginia Waters, and anybody else that we may hold in our heart right now. Again, thank you, and thank you for your son. Help us to remember what you did for us in bringing your son. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. Now please join me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. I'm going to entertain a motion to accept our agenda. We have a motion. And a second. Alderman Sprouse.
I have a motion. I need to add, and I apologize, I don't have the ordinance number. Let me look it up here. A resolution. I'd like to add Resolution 2019-69, housekeeping measure. It was in General Committee tonight. I'd like to add that as the very first item under ordinances and resolutions. Also, as part of that, I would like to remove from the agenda resolution, make sure it's still on here, Resolution 2019-61. That was also in General Committee. General Committee recommended, and the coach director agreed to hold off the board's decision on that until after the first of the year. There's some information that is going to be resolved next month that may be able to help this issue.
I'm the sponsor of item I. I'll just withdraw that.
Thank you.
And we'll go back to the first part of your motion. What was that?
First part of the motion was adding Resolution 2019-69, resolution regarding funding and compensation for the interim city administrator. I believe I saw that you sent a copy of that to all the board this morning via email, and I'll get, if we don't have a hard copy, I'll make sure there's a hard copy by the time we get to that. Add that to the very first item of ordinances and resolutions.
Okay, and that came up just the first time tonight in General Committee?
Actually, it's confirming the decision that was voted upon on this board at our meeting last month. It's just, we were told it was a housekeeping just in case issue.
Okay, I was in there. I don't believe it's a housekeeping. Does everybody have a copy of that? In fact, it's changed significantly from what it was before. It's not affirming that money is coming from one department. It's changing where the money's coming from. Does everybody have a copy of that? Alderman Robertson, I'm sorry. Did you have a copy of that?
I don't have a copy with me.
Okay, and this is Resolution 2019-69.
Okay, Mayor, I will make sure that the copy that you distributed electronically this morning has a hard copy before it comes up before the board. Everyone have plenty of time to read it again if they did not read your email this morning.
Okay, but again, okay, you second that, adding that agenda. And again, the first time this came up was just a few minutes ago, about 35 minutes ago in our General Committee?
No, sir, it did not. It did not. This is something that I don't even think that it is required, but we're doing it just to make sure. Just to make sure. I will be very happy to discuss it when we get it on the agenda, but I'm tired of the obstruction, I am tired of the misinformation, and I'm tired of casting out illusions that people are doing things inappropriately just because you disagree with the decision of this board. Let's vote on it. If people want to discuss it, we can have the discussion. You were in the room when we discussed it in committee, and when I was asked if you had anything to say about it, you said nothing. So let's have a conversation. Let's put it on the agenda again, and we'll have a conversation about it.
When was the first time that this was actually written? When was it written, and when was it the first time that anybody saw it? I think it was Friday, am I correct?
You know, I can tell you there's something on the page right here that it's a red line edition of an ordinance that we voted on last month, and this, just a few minutes ago, something you've sponsored, this is the first time maybe 5, 6 minutes ago that I saw these changes.
If we could stick to the item.
There's an ordinance
This-
on here that is the 5 minutes ago is the first time I saw this. We had a discussion in committee. You yourself sent the email this morning. I
did
don't
say-
understand how you can send an email to everyone on the board this morning and then you want to debate that the information has not been distributed.
I don't think this morning really fits the requirement for 2 weeks. Alderman Woodcock.
I would like to remind the board and the mayor, we have a lot of kids in the room
Amen.
looking up to us.
Amen.
I don't want them to think this is how government works.
I agree. I think that
Hold on,
people,
Alderman Woodcock, go ahead.
That's all I have to say. Like, if we can defer this, if we can do it some other time, less embarrassing, that'd be great.
We need to set an agenda before we do that. Do you all want to go
Right.
ahead and approve the agenda as it is presented? We can do that.
no. I
Hold on. Alderman Bolt, we have a motion, a second to add this item to the agenda. Alderman Bolt, do you want to speak on this item?
No.
Okay. Alderman Robertson, I still have you lit up. I think you're probably finished. Okay. Alderman Strauss, did you want to speak again?
Yes, sir. I do think it's very unfortunate that we're placed in these situations, but I do think it's very important that people see what's going on, that we do have obstruction, we do have confusion, we do have people who are putting out, we don't have people, we have a person who's putting out information that is meant to deceive the members of this board and the public to whom we are accountable. It's unfortunate. We can discuss the merits of this resolution when we come before it, but I think what you have to see is very unfortunate. I get a little emotional in this, but I will tell you why. It's because I cannot hear someone say something that's not true as easily as some people can say things that are not true. Thank you.
Alderman Strauss, I don't believe I said anything is untrue. I also want to mention that, for those of you there, we have a rule that when something goes to committee, it has to wait to come here for 2 weeks. Resolution 2019-69 was emailed to me Friday. I chose to send it to the board, not realizing it hadn't gone to the rest of the board. I figured that out, I think it was yesterday, that it hadn't gone to the rest of the board. So even if it had been sent out to everybody on Friday, that's not 2 weeks. It was first considered by a committee literally 40 minutes ago. That's not 2 weeks. I'm trying to obey the rules that we have that this whole board has set. Alderman Brown, do you just want to go and vote? Alderman Brown.
Thank you. Essentially, what you're asking is to waive the 2-week rule that the mayor just talked about to add this to the agenda.
Alderman Strauss.
I am not the sponsor of this, but I have been advised by staff that this is something that could potentially, no one feels that there is anything inappropriate by what we passed at our last meeting regarding funding this position. But a question has been raised. And so it was said that if we want to continue the course that we decided at our most recent meeting, that we can vote again, essentially affirming the funding portion of what we voted on last time. If we don't, then anyone who wants to raise a question about how we're funding this could continue to raise that question.
If I could, I don't know how you could say that this is affirming something. I'm sorry, go ahead. Go ahead,
Thank you.
Alderman Brown.
But essentially, you're saying we're waiving the 2-week rule. This was at committee tonight.
Yes.
Thank you.
I have a hard time saying this affirms something when it actually affirms what we did 2 weeks ago, when it actually repeals what we did 2 weeks ago. But I think we should go ahead and vote. All those in favor of adding this to the agenda, please signify by saying aye. When Kay calls your name, those opposed, please say no.
Bolt. Brown.
Aye.
Campbell.
Aye.
Cunningham. Edwards.
Aye.
Hayes.
Yes, ma'am.
Petrelli. Robertson. Skidmore.
Aye.
Sprouse.
Aye.
Waters. Woodcock. Clary.
No. Okay, so that's going to be at the top of ordinance and resolutions. That'll be Resolution 2019-69. All those in favor of approving the agenda as amended, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. That passed unanimously. Next, Coach Waiteka.
Has anything changed? I gotta go get copies. Has anything changed?
So we got to see you 2 weeks ago. And you want to tell us a little bit about this group? We 2 weeks ago, he was here talking about the middle school teams that he coaches. You want to talk about the high school teams? Thank you.
I was very grateful for our middle school team to be recognized. Middle school program, great group of boys and girls. I'm more of a cheerleader. High school kids, I can be a little mean to them, and it pays off. But boys and girls were county champions this year. Boys and girls JV were also county champions. It's been a great group to work with. We're 62 members strong, and just like iron sharpens iron, all these other kids strengthen each other. We're losing 17 seniors this next year, so it's going to be a big hit, but we have a lot of upcomers ready to go. Boys are also regional champions. Girls were third in the region, so it's been a great group to work with. Like I said, we'll be missing so many kids next year, but we have an army of kids ready to step up and take over.
Cool. Coach Wojtek, why don't you do this? Why don't you call their names, hand me the certificates, and then I'll hand them to the students.
Sounds good.
Okay.
All right, South, so we'll go ladies first. Sydney Bell. Annabelle DeWeese. Riley Dubree. Jordan Evans. Sarah Friels. And Kate Renner. All right, now for the boys. Spencer Abbey. Blake Brown. Ethan Craig.
Keep stepping in front of the camera between you.
It's fine. Aiden Evans. Andrew DeWeese. Luke Freeman. Tristan Gould. Ethan Kirkpatrick. Ethan Lanning. Dominic Minio. Trying to bypass it. Joseph Minio. Eric Mitchell. Eric was Sumner County Runner of the Year this year. Andrew Nye. Anthony Nye. Tyler Pearson. Logan Tooley. And John Walker.
Unless you want to take pictures, this is what you do. So what happens, push in this direction. Best place to get pictures from down here. I'm going to move this a little bit. Sort of go a little bit that direction. And Coach Wojtek, you should probably be up there too.
Somebody found it at the rock.
Yeah. It'll all be on the same thing. Always to make it shorter. Wow.
Coach Wojtek, thank you all and congratulations. Appreciate it. We have a public hearing. This is to hear comments on ordinance contracting the municipal city limits of the city of Hendersonville, Tennessee on Big Station Camp Creek Boulevard. We have nobody signed up for that public hearing. And next, I want to entertain a motion to approve our November 26, 2019 meeting minutes. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving our meeting minutes for November 26, 2019, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. That passed unanimously. And now we have citizen comments. Speakers must identify themselves by name and address. If I don't, public comment shall be limited to 5 minutes per individual, which time is not transferable to other speakers. All comments are to be directed to the presiding officer, not to the alderman, city staff, or other members of the public. Comments must address issues, not individuals or personalities. Personal attacks shall not be tolerated. Comments may support or oppose particular issues or measures, but the motives of those with differing views shall not be questioned or attacked. Malicious comments will not be allowed. Speeches for or against particular candidates running for public office will not be allowed. Beth Wettengale, 594 Indian Lake Road.
Thank you for this opportunity tonight to speak to you guys. First of all, I'd like to thank one of the aldermen in Ward 4, which is my ward, Andy Bolt. Thank you for being a co-sponsor on this resolution. Also for you, Russ, and also for you, Eddie. I appreciate your support on this. And of course to Daryl Woodcock, who's the main sponsor of this resolution. I've had his ear for a while now, and he is a great listener, and he follows through on things, and he's put a lot of energy and effort into bringing this to the table tonight, and I really appreciate that. You're a man of the people. Just want you to know it doesn't go unnoticed. I've done some research on this over the last several months. I had a dream that voters could have a referendum on term limits. And in order to make sure I wasn't on an island by myself, I started to do some research. And one of the things that I did with my research is to talk to people. And I have a lot of friends. I have friends that are like-minded. We vote the same. I have friends that are on the opposite end of the political spectrum from me. And I have a lot of apolitical friends who would rather be covered in bees than to be here at this meeting tonight. And that's probably the majority of my friends, actually. They vote, but they don't comment on Facebook. They don't share political posts, that sort of thing. I also spoke to several strangers, people in the grocery store line, when I'm filling my Jeep up with gas, asking the person next to me, the guy that sits on the stool next to my husband at Bluegrass Bar and Grill. And I asked them two questions, my friends and strangers alike. And I want to tell you that I didn't preface my questions with, hey, spending some time studying the charter at Hendersonville and talking to the State Election Commission and about term limits and what do you think. I did not prime them to give me the response that I'm looking for. As a hypothetical question, I just said, what do you think about term limits? And almost every single person that I talked to for the last probably 6 months, and I'm talking about dozens and dozens of people, almost every single person said, I'm for term limits on every level of government. Term limits are something that would probably cure a lot of the political ills of our current situation on all the levels. But the more important thing, the more important question that I asked was, what would you think about the opportunity to vote for that, to vote for term limits? And even more people said that they would absolutely love that. Why? Because it gives them the opportunity to choose. It's the freedom to choose, which is the epitome of freedom. So I could share with you tonight my personal feelings about term limits, but really that's not what this meeting is about. It's not about my personal feelings of term limits any more than it is the 13 of you. This is about allowing citizens the opportunity to weigh in on their choices. This should be the easiest vote that you have all year. It's not like you have to tally up how many people have contacted you about this situation. This is about, it's not about you deciding on the issue for your constituents. It's very easy. It's about putting the decision directly in the hands of them to decide. So it's not about your 13 votes necessarily tonight. It's about the 36,859 votes that could possibly take place on November the 3rd, 2020, if you allow it. And whether you vote this through as a favorable recommendation to the state or not, it's not ending tonight. Because for years, the citizens have been told this farce that there's no options as far as term limits.
30 seconds.
And now we know that not only could we have term limits, but the only thing that's holding us back is Boma. So you can vote no tonight if you'd like, and you can answer to your constituents tomorrow. But this issue is not going to go away until the voters have a say. Thank you so much for your time.
Beth, thank you. Stephen Puckett, Sanders Ferry Road.
All right. My name is Stephen Puckett, 228 Sanders Ferry Road, apartment A21, Hendersonville, Tennessee. I'm here tonight to talk about the term limit resolution where you're asking the state to allow the people to put this issue to rest with a referendum. I do want to say at the outset that personally, like the Founding Fathers, I'm actually opposed to term limits outside the executive branch due to the concerns about gaming of elections by moneyed powers. However, like the Founding Fathers, I also support the idea and the concept, the principle of self-determination, where the people are self-determinant. That's why our Founding Fathers allow us to amend the Constitution and provide an opportunity for each political party every 6 years roughly to achieve a constitutional Congress, which is 67 members in the Senate and 209 members in the House. The last opportunity for the Republicans was in 2018 to achieve that, and for the Democrats it's coming up in 2020. So this is, and so when it comes to self-determination, it's oftentimes about not just, when it comes, especially referendums and even like a constitutional amendment, it comes to settling issues for each generation. And it's usually resulting around the structures of our government, whether it be term limits or city administrator or some other structure. And just like at the national level with constitutional amendments, there are right now constitutional amendments that are yet to be ratified. In fact, the Bill of Rights was part of 12 original amendments to our Constitution. 11 of those 12 have been ratified. The first 10 were the Bill of Rights. The 11th was ratified in the modern era, after Roosevelt. So each generation has an opportunity to look, when we look at these issues, and put them to rest. Now I will say, because we are playing Mother May I with the state, one thing we do might want to consider with the resolution is something that was actually a good concern that was brought up, and that is the threshold for consider referendum passage. Right now, the way the statute's written, and the statute that would be amended, is set as simple majority, which is 50% plus 1. If we wanted to raise that threshold, we would have to ask the state for that permission to set and have it put into the statute that we would have permission to decide anywhere between the 50% plus 1 or 3/4 majority. That would be reasonable. The concern I would have, knowing that this is going to be an election year, that they'd be looking at the legislation on, I would worry that might create a little bit more conversation than I'm comfortable with in the local committee. Because this is something that, because of election season, it will have to go through very quietly. I believe it was Alderman Hayes had mentioned, he had asked some of the legislators how they felt, in which I'm sure he asked about term limits instead of just simply updating Title VI, which, as the old saying goes, legislators sometimes have to pass good pieces of legislation and then be able to tell the angry folks they didn't realize what they were voting for. So I'm here in support of this resolution to ask the state to give this board the power to put before the people a referendum to put this issue to rest, because I've listened to this issue for 8 years, and it's a bipartisan issue. And I think like impact fees,
Stephen, 30 seconds.
Like impact fees, it's a great bumper sticker until you start looking at the details. And once you start looking at the details, that's when you start getting concerns. And that's a conversation for that referendum. Until right now, this is about self-determination and having the state give us the ability to be self-determinant and to allow the citizens to put this issue to rest. Thank you.
Stephen, thank you. Mary Burns, Roberta Drive.
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity to come here and talk a little bit about my favorite subject. Of course, it's trash. This evening when I arrived in the parking lot, I received a phone call from another one of the members of the recycling committee to which I belong, and they said, "Did you know there's an RFP, a request for proposals out for citywide recycling?" And I thought, don't be silly, that can't be true, I'll look it up. Well, there really is an RFP out for recycling citywide, and I don't know how many of you are aware of it, but certainly it didn't come up at Public Works, and it has not been brought up at a recycling committee meeting, because I'm at all of those, and it is on our city's website. The proposal seems to be what this board voted down, which is the opt-in program. The RFP went out on the 6th, which of course is before today, which is when I think the new administrator, who is the one that should be doing that particular job. But I had a few different questions about this particular RFP. I have not read the whole thing. I didn't hear about it until I got into the parking lot today. I have asked a few aldermen who said, I didn't know anything about it. So where does this come from? You voted it down. Okay. How many will participate from the pilot program into this particular RFP? We don't know. Page 16 asks bidders to input their monthly charge per household for 2 service options under description of service, but wording in both options appear to be exactly the same. Is there an intent to have 2 different options? Why demand things that increase the cost to provide the service that the vendor does not need in providing the service without a city contract? The performance bond, which would of course be required if somebody replies to this RFP. The requirements of new vehicles, the requirements of city logos on the trash cans, and it says city logo imprinted on carts, weight reports, audits, complaints, damage, and fees. All of these things are supposedly, I have not read it, within the RFP. Now, how is it that this is a real RFP for citywide recycling? If this is politics, shame on those that are doing this. This is something this committee voted down. It was brought up at Public Works. It was brought up here to the aldermen. It was voted down by the aldermen. And yet we have on our city website a proposal for an RFP. That is bypassing us again. Now, politics at its finest. That is not what this committee is trying to do. We are trying to create something good for the city by reducing the amount of waste. We will reduce the cost on the fees for landfill tipping. We are serious, and we are not trying to be, I'm not even trying to be rude, even though I'm in somebody's face, I'm sure. But this is wrong. When the main people in the recycling committee have pull into a parking lot and get phone calls that say, hey, did you know a request for proposals is out for citywide recycling? It smells like politics to me, and I'm sorry. That's just not right.
Mary, 30 seconds.
Well, within my last 30 seconds, I do want to voice an opinion regarding term limits. Referendums are not free. They cost money. And I can see a whole lot of things that we could spend money on besides trying to pick on an alderman from another area. I like every single alderman up there, and I hope you all get elected for as long as you like. I don't have an issue with any alderman, none of you. And it seems to me that those requesting
Mary, thank you.
permission
Next we have
for this
Otis Jones.
referendum want somebody else's alderman out.
Next we have Otis Jones and Nathan Forrest Drive. Thank you, Mary.
Mayor, I have a point of order.
Uh,
If you just hold on just a second. If I could have a point of order, thank you, Mayor. If it's okay with the mayor and the board, I didn't know about this either, and heck, I'm the chairman of the Public Works.
If you want me to, when you get to your committee,
Yes, sir.
I think Marshall's probably here, and if not, we can hit it.
Yeah, I was just going to ask during Public Works Committee, Mayor, if I could, I'd like to ask Ms. Burns some questions about that, if it's okay.
Okay.
Thank you very
And
much.
I'm happy to help out as well.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
We're at citizen comments. Is it something we need to add to the agenda, or? Okay. Mr. Jones, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm Otis Jones, 144 Nathan Forrest Drive. I'm also part of an organization called Hendersonville Organization for Political Education. Now that's called HOPE. Now, I assume that you're going to hear quite a bit about the organization over the next 12 months. Hendersonville Organization for Political Education. We have several things, but let me tell you some of the major things that we're interested in. We're interested in resist the appointment of a city administrator without the approval of the citizens. We want to uphold the organization, the current supposedly BOMA that the citizens voted for. The citizens voted for it, and that's what we want to continue into the future, and that's what we'll be working for. And we want to continue to allow we want to continue to allow the citizens to elect a mayor that will define a mission, and the people will vote for that mission, and the mayor will implement that mission. Now, the reasons given for a city manager or administrator, it doesn't make any difference what you call them. One of them is continuity of management. Well, the typical life, if you will, of a city administrator or city manager is generally less than 4 years. So you're getting a greater problem than you tried to describe as continuity. Now, save money. You save money? Well, several times you have mentioned Franklin. And if you will look at all the places where they have a city administrator, look at them one after another, what they do is they start off with, oh, we're going to do this, the city administrator. And then they'll add an assistant, and then another assistant, and then another assistant. If you think I'm making this up, I don't remember which one of you, but several of you maybe have mentioned Franklin at one time or another. And Franklin has a city administrator and 3 city assistant city administrators. That's $500,000 by just about anybody's budgeting process. Now, I ask you, how many miles of paving will that do every year? Because you're starting down a path that will spend $500,000 every year to replace the management structure that has been here for years and years and years. Now, that's what we are about. And I want you to remember this organization, Hendersonville Organization for Political Education. And we'll be talking to you again. Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Jones, thank you. Dr. Jordan, Ms. Dewey.
Thank you so very much. I'm not going to be repetitious in some of the things that I've heard here tonight. I am, may I say, Mayor, members of the council, Vice Mayor, and to the public. First, let me tell you something. I am interested in term limits, very much so. Term limits was instituted in Nashville and also in Gallatin. And I was one of the persons who helped this measure get through legislation. Addressing this issue, of course, is an issue that is national, state, and local. Now, I'm going to move my script over and talk from the hip. Yes, I'm for term limits. It affords the opportunity for fresh blood to come in. Now, may I say to you, we have a wonderful government. You're great. And I'm not just saying that. You have a difficult job to perform. And ladies, my hat goes off. When I was in the council, I was the only lady, and there were 39 men. Okay? One of the things that term limits would do, it would dampen corruption. Of course, we wouldn't have that here, by no means. But also, it promotes political accountability. Having new blood is important. Now, I have called many of you, and asked you to support this. Now, if you told me that you were going to be for this measure, I hope that you stand by your commitment to me, because I would be committed to you. This measure is very important because the author of this measure is on his way out. And just by courtesy, this would be his perhaps most important endeavor. All it's doing is giving the constituents the opportunity to say yes. Now, if you say no, you mean you don't want the citizens' involvement? Why not? What are you afraid of? What are you afraid of? Let them make the decision. That's what you're here for, to serve them. Now, some of you perhaps may feel a little insecure, but this is not your livelihood. This is not your livelihood. Let the people say yes. I asked you to give this measure to the people. Now, you folks, I know it's not going to be, I hope not anybody say they're going to abstain, because abstaining is no in anybody's book. We need so many votes to get this passed. If you ask me to help you, and I can be of good help, But I tell you, this is very important to me, and it's important to your colleague, Mr. Woodcock. He's term limiting. He's only serving one term. He's done a good job. What you scared of? He can come back if he wants to,
Dr.
but I
Jordan, 30
doubt
seconds.
it. How many more?
30 seconds.
30 seconds. You can serve as a mentor, and one of the best mentors up there are some of my church members, because I have a lot of respect for you. You can train, you can talk, and you know how to do it. Put some fresh blood in there. Not that your blood is cankered, but just needs some more.
Thank you, Dr.
Please. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy the Surf, Spadeleaf Boulevard. Amy, since somebody with the same last name is next, will you tell me if I pronounced your last name correctly?
Yes, you did.
Okay, thank you.
All right, well, I'm just going to keep this very simple. I had a big, long thing I wanted to say, but not really. Anyway, I just want to tell you that this resolution before you tonight, it's not about your personal feelings. It's not even about what I feel like. It's about letting the constituents have a choice and let them have a say in their local government. And I'm just simply going to say, please allow me and all the citizens the right to determine if Henderson aldermen have term limits. Citizens should decide this, not politicians.
Amy, thank you. Next, we have Pamela Surf, Spadeleaf Boulevard. Amy, thank you.
Pamela Surf, 100 Spadeleaf Boulevard. Thank you for the opportunity. And I just have a couple little things to say about term limits. I know at one meeting it was voiced that it would ban the time and the choices. It doesn't ban anybody from voting for who's ever running. If you're running against no one, then sure, you'll probably end up with the seat, no doubt. If someone else is running, it gives them a choice to have a voice in what's going on in their ward. It just, to me, the citizens need to have some say. And to be honorable, I would think you would all want that. It doesn't make any difference if it's a 2-term, 4-term, 8-term, whatever. But the citizens would have something to say, a voice that they feel is honorable. And I only have one question about the city interim. It was said that at one point, he can only work so many hours because of his retirement setup. And he stated that he probably will work like 1 hour a day. I don't know how you can do any budget, administration, anything else on 1 hour a day or 3 hours a day. Running a city is a big job, granted. And so I just kind of wonder where they're going with that. So that's just my question. How do you run a whole city on 1 hour a day? So thank you for your time.
Pam, thank you. Kimberly Overton, Hazelwood Drive.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to take the opportunity to speak on the issue of term limits today. And first of all, I just wanted to thank Alderman Woodcock for putting forth this resolution and for the co-sponsors of the bill. I would urge all of you to please support this and allow the citizens to decide on this important issue. A no vote, at least in my mind, it simply says that you believe that we are not intelligent enough to make our own decisions and we don't know what's good for us. And nothing could be further from the truth. We are more than capable. In fact, it is by our decisions that most of you are sitting up there tonight. We elected you to represent us, not to rule us. Your job is to listen to your constituents who in good faith have put you in office and to act accordingly. You have the power this evening to use your vote to either give a voice back to the people of Hendersonville or you can use your vote to smother our collective voices. But one thing is for certain, if you choose the latter, many of us won't forget this on election night. And that's the one time you won't be able to vote our voices away. And that's all I really wanted to say. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and thank you to each of you for serving our city.
Kimberly, thank you.
Thank you.
Next we have Charlie Floyd at Southburn Drive. Kimberly, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Season's greetings to one and all. I live at 305 Southburn Drive, and I had a lot of interesting things to say, but these people preceding me have stolen my thunder. So allow me to say that I personally am strongly in favor of term limits, not only at this level, but in the state level and in the House and the Senate of the United States in particular. And with that, I'm going to sit down and say thank you, and I do urge you to vote for it.
Charlie, thank you. John Prentice, Airflow Drive.
As with any discussion, it gets a little better when you have multiple points of view, and I have a slightly different one. In my estimation, the city of Hendersonville has and has always had term limits. That's called voting. And if you don't think that works, look at the 13 of you all. How many of you have been here how many of you are in your third term or more? That's right. Not many. That's term limits in action by voting. If term limits are put in place, and we are a big city, that's absolutely true. We have complications in operations, that's absolutely true. However, our wards are quite small, and that's where aldermen are elected, is in a ward. And if you put term limits in, you're denying folks in the ward the ability to vote for who they really want to. And I've heard all kind of stuff about, these incumbents, these good old boy networks, this gang of whatever, they're in there for politics, they're in there to make money. I've heard all of that stuff. Doesn't happen that way in a little ward in Hendersonville. You get to be an alderman by providing the service your constituents voted for you for. And if you keep getting elected term after term after term, I hear all the stuff that says why, except I never hear maybe that's because you're doing what the majority of your constituents elected you to do. And I think that term limits in a city our size, matter of fact, in a city as much bigger than us, is probably not a good idea. And when you get to state and national level, that's a whole different discussion. But down here, grassroots where we live, I don't think term limits are a good idea. It takes away some people's right to vote for who they want to, and the fact is, we have them. Look around. Sitting right in front of you are term limits in action because people voted. Thank you.
Mr. Prentice, thank you. Tyrone J., Massacre Farms. Hopefully they go at the same rate.
Well, I got to know where I'm at. Okay, I'm starting. Thank you. Merry Christmas to everybody. Merry Christmas. Term limits. Thank you. Term limits. I'm going to provide you reasons why I'm for the term limits and why I would want you to be for term limits. By the way, this vote is tight. We need 9 votes. So I'm going to probably use the full 5 minutes and try to make my case, maybe a different point of view than others. So we have many different points of view to go against term limits, such as, if you don't like me, vote me out. The citizens have that vote. I agree with that. We need institutional knowledge. I agree with that. Worry of lack of quality candidates. I agree with that. I just gave you 3 reasons why to go against term limits. So why would I be for term limits? I just agreed with all the main points. I'll tell you. It's about fresh ideas. We, as human beings, if we're not exposed to different ideas, we don't know what we don't know. It's just that way. We don't know what we don't know. In my careers, I'm in IT, been in different jobs all over the country, managers, non-manager. Most of my jobs I spent 3 to 5 years, and I move on. Provided some insight into places I go, move on to other opportunities. And when I go to these other opportunities, I learn new things, new ways. Oh, you can do this is a better, more efficient way to do it. There's one time I stayed at a company for 10 years. It was American General in Brentwood. I still consider that the biggest mistake in my life. Not because it's American General, not because of the people I work for. Everything, like in general, we get used to our own rut. Nice, comfortable rut, no change. But in those 10 years being in IT, evolutions were happening outside in other worlds that I thought I was educating myself on, but until I got involved and seen other people do things and other ideas, I did not know. A whole different set of lights were opening up for me. So when we come in to debunk all these lack of quality candidates, and give me a point of order if I'm out of order, please, and I'll move on. Examples, my ward, Ward 3. This past time we had a open seat. That open seat position was 3 candidates was running. On the other side of the coin, we also had the same election from our other Ward 3 member, and the person decided to run again. For all conversational sake, that person ran unopposed. It's the 3rd term, and name recognition goes a long way. For example, back in the 90s, there was a movie out. Eddie Murphy was in it called Distinguished Gentleman. A congressman, longtime serving, died. His name was Jeff Johnson. Eddie Murphy's character's name was Thomas Jefferson Johnson. He truncated his middle name, used his middle name, last name. Everybody went in and said, well, that's who we voted for before for years, so we vote for him again. So he automatically went in on name recognition. Name recognition is hard to get around. You got donations coming in on your 2nd and 3rd term. So a newcomer running against an incumbent has an extra couple hurdles to run through.
Tell around 30 seconds.
And then if people, because we have lives, married, kids, whatever, like tonight, me being here, I'm going to lose sleep. I got classes to do, work to do, and my wife, she doesn't want to come, and she said, I won't see you tonight, I won't see you in the morning. But we don't know what we don't know, and we need fresh ideas. That's the bottom line.
Gentlemen, thank you. Next, we have our Finance Committee. Chairman Cunningham.
No report, Mayor.
Appreciate that. Chairman Sprouse, General Committee.
Yes, sir, Mayor. General Committee met earlier tonight. The following pieces of legislation were before us. All were recommended by the committee for to the board. Ordinance amending municipal code dealing with compensation and classification. Resolution 2019-61, resolution changing some hiring in the codes department. Resolution 2019-64, also changing job classification list and pay tables. Resolution 2019-68, resolution renaming Park Road Conway Twitty Lane. And then Resolution 2019-69, which we've added to the agenda tonight, a resolution regarding funding of compensation for interim city administrator. Thank you.
Chairman Sprouse, thank you. Chairman Brown, Public Safety.
No report, Mayor.
Appreciate that. Chairman Skidmore, Public Works. You want me to go first, or?
Yes,
Okay.
well,
Okay.
let me do this,
I'll be
make an
brief.
announcement
Oh, go ahead.
first. First of all, Merry Christmas to everybody, and I hope everybody has a great Christmas this year. It seems like the wheel, we've been talking a lot about politics already, and the wheel never changes. The faces do sometimes, but the wheel never does. But I do want to extend everybody season's greetings to everyone up here on the board and as well as out in the public. The only thing is that I'll relinquish my time back to the mayor to talk about recycling. But I want to let everybody know that at least in Ward 1 and Ward 2, we have some construction going on that is going to occur. And that is on Walton Ferry Road, right past Luna Lane. And that's across from the, what is that thing?
Bird sanctuary.
The bird sanctuary that we have. It's right across, just south of that, just right down the road, where we are changing a culvert. Excuse me. That's going to start on Thursday from 4 in the afternoon till about 6 in the morning. I know there's been some idea that we've had fresh ideas. So there's been some comment tonight. We're starting to do a little thing as far as drainage and construction, things like that in public works that we have authority to do. We're doing little things a little differently now, where it's less heartache on the constituency of each ward in Hendersonville. So that's why we're doing this after traffic. And then, if y'all's mamas always used to say only the worst things come out after midnight, so y'all need to stay off the roads at midnight and make sure you're at home because there's going to be construction going on Walton Ferry Road. So we're doing the drainage, the culvert right there that goes across Walton Ferry. It's collapsed or in the process of. So I want to let you all know on Thursday from 4 in the afternoon till about 6 in the morning, there's going to be road construction right there. So I'm excited about it, and I know people in Ward 1 and people in Ward 2 are ecstatic because it's been needed to be replaced for quite some time. So we're getting right to it. We want to do it when there's a letdown. There's no paving going on in the city of Hendersonville. It won't be until probably the spring of this coming year, and that actually has a lot to do with the weather. So we're bound by that, but we can still do some work in areas that need it when it comes to drainage. Are there any questions on that from Ward 2 or Ward 1? Yes. Oh, sure, okay. Yes.
Did you have a question, Alderman Petrelli?
Well, Ms. Petrelli, Alderman Petrelli had a statement.
Thank you. I'd also like to thank our Public Works team. They're working on a drainage problem on True Cord that has extreme flooding. So I'd like to give a shout out to Trace Burkett and our team that's been working on that. Also, Ward 1 was due to have a drainage meeting in August, and that hasn't happened yet. So hopefully with our interim city manager, we can coordinate with Public Works and have that meeting for Ward 1, hopefully in January or February, kind of give a game plan before the flooding season starts again. And thank you for the update on Walton Ferry Road, and I am very curious to understand what's going on with this RFP for recycling. Thank you.
Yes, and so Peg's right. Thank you for the and I appreciate the patience over with the homes that are affected over on True Cord. As Pat has been over there and myself and Peg, and I don't know if anybody else had the opportunity to go over there, but it was a nightmare, was it not? I mean, it was a serious nightmare. So we're working in Public Works. We try to get to everybody that we can, and we work as fast and hard as we can. So, Mayor, you want to enlighten us about this recycling?
Sure, and I'm going to test my memory here. This goes back probably back when we had the bids previous, and we had asked for 4 different types of service, and we got bids for 3 of them. And there's a lot of discussion in Public Works Committee back then about on the one, whereas the opt-in program, could the company bill that directly? Could we provide any sort of rebate? I know Alderman Robertson talked about that up at this board as well. And we were told that would really have to go back out for bids in order to do that. And again, I'm testing my memory. I know we talked about at the board and at Public Works Committee at least 2 months ago, maybe 3 months ago. So in the course of we've done several RFPs or RFQs for several different items within different departments in the past several weeks. So that's why it sort of tested my memory. And the idea was some of the items that were discussed, like I said a couple weeks ago, was the idea was that some of the items that were discussed a couple weeks ago, if we could get a bid or bids for that, then we could bring those back to the board, possibly move faster. This is not something that was voted down. That was bad information that we got earlier. This is not seeking bids for something that was voted down. This is a different type of service. And I'm happy to email out tomorrow. It's testing my memory right now to remember what exactly was in that. Like I said, several RFQs that go out every month. We have no obligation. It will go to the recycling committee, it will go to the public works committee, it will come to us. We have no obligation to pick any of those at all. The idea was that if it answers someone's questions, it would provide a recycling program sooner instead of later. And so certainly that's at least it would provide a recycling option, I should say, sooner instead of later. Again, the board is under no obligation to pick it. It's one of several RFPs or RFQs that go out on a regular basis. And let me see. As I mentioned, it covered some of the options that were mentioned here that were not in the bids that we did a couple months ago. That's what it was. So when those come back, go to the recycling committee, go to the public works committee. And again, it's nothing that it's got some specs in there, all that we've talked about in the past. At the Public Works Committee and at the board level. So and I'll send it to you tomorrow that could answer more.
Yeah, my only response, I don't know, Ms. Burns, do you want to comment? I hate to put you on the spot. Well, I
Suspend the rules.
Never approached the podium.
I have no doubt
Hold
about
on,
that.
Alderman Skidmore, go ahead.
Yes, sir. No. Well, I would like to move to suspend the rules to ask one of our
Motion to suspend the rules in a second.
recycling.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say no. That passed unanimously. Ms. Burns.
So you've heard the response from the mayor. How do you feel about that as representative of recycling? Is that okay for you?
No.
Okay.
I think it's breaking away from the pattern that you guys have discussed as the way that the business was supposed to be all along, that there is a process, and it has been bypassed. Okay, it has bypassed aldermen, it bypassed the new city administrator, and certainly it bypassed us low-life recycling committee. By low-life, I don't mean that. I think some of the finest people I know are on there. And one of them is his wife, and she's the one that called me and said, hair on fire, what's going on? Find out what it is. And to institute a process or even put it forward for a vote with the requirements as if it was a city-supported program, just from what little bit I have read, without reading the proposal, I have not read it, it states practically the same things that we will be bringing to you for an acceptable city program. The name on the carton, the billing, and all of that. But are you planning on hiring a staff to handle the complaints of corporations that don't have a contract with you? I don't get it. I don't hear any difference other than he says there is different things. What different things? I haven't read this. I haven't seen it. And people get upset when they get bypassed in the process, like aldermen. And this clearly could have been brought through the regular process. This is not a hair-on-fire thing. We're not getting recycling like what we wanted, and that's quite obvious. So I'd gladly answer any questions. My opinion is only my opinion. We all have an opinion. And it feels very political because it was done before the person that I would be meeting with now to set up to put out for an RFP. It was done before the voted-on administrator. and it just feels uncomfortable. And, I'm not trying to be in someone's face. I like to see a city run by the rules you guys make. And the rules you guys make, you have committees that need to go over these items before they come to you. And I think an RFP is something very serious. It's something that has to come to you for a vote, so why wouldn't half of the aldermen know that there even was an RFP?
If I
I'm
could ask
sorry.
you a question.
Oh, by all means.
Yeah, RFPs have to come to us for a vote before they go out?
I'm sorry.
Did you say RFPs have to come to the board before they go out?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I said that an RFP is something that the board does eventually vote on. So shouldn't they know about that, an expectation of RFPs are going to go out?
Okay. We send out several. Do you know of any other RFPs that we've sent out in the past month or so?
I'm focused mainly on solid waste issues. I try not to focus on the politics, and I even like Jamie Clary.
Well, I appreciate that.
You know,
I'm curious if you're stating state law that I don't understand about RFPs, that the board needs to know about those ahead of time.
No, I wasn't making a legal statement. And certainly I know about RFPs. For 26 years, I was an elected representative, and I know clearly what an RFP is and how the process works. And generally, the body or the board knows that there is, somebody's going to be building a school, somebody's going to be building a playground, and there would be an RFP. It would be a general type of knowledge, and it doesn't feel like this general knowledge expected an RFP to come out like it did.
Would you like me to send it to you tomorrow so you can read the rest of it?
I would like that very much, thank you.
Okay, we'll take care of that. Alderman Waters, go ahead.
May I follow up with the...
Sure.
With our chairman of Public Works?
Yes, sir.
How many on this board have read what this lady has talked about tonight? How many? Am I the only one?
Oh, did you get one?
I got it. What you're doing, ma'am, you're getting a cart before the horse. You don't know, and I've got it. But look here, not a soul on this board's got it. So you're getting your, you know what to say.
I understand your analogy.
Yeah,
but
should have. Yeah.
Come on, it hadn't even been announced yet. I don't know why you're making such a big issue out of this.
Because it is a big issue.
It is not. I've got it. I read it, ma'am.
Well, I'm sorry that you didn't share it with the rest of the committee because you're our representative.
What's there to share with the rest of them?
That an RFP has gone out. I would assume that our representative would share with us.
Ma'am, I'm talking. What did it say that I should share with this board?
Oh, those rules are not set. They're rules of just polite, general committee rules.
Yep.
Ma'am, you need to just back off on that, and because I've got it, and I think you're just getting upset over nothing.
I don't think I'm all that upset.
I do.
Well, okay.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay.
I don't like it.
Alderman Hayes, do you have a question for? Okay. Alderman Bolt, do you have a question here? Okay. Alderman Petrelli, do you have a question for Ms. Burns?
Thank you, Mayor.
Go ahead.
First of all, I'd like to apologize how you were just treated. I realize that you serve of your own time and volition to be on this committee, and as a citizen of Ward 1, I'm going to apologize on behalf of the board for how you've been treated tonight, and I do find it ironic that when a woman comes up and is assertive, she's upset, but a man can be assertive and it's all okay.
I get it.
I'm going to make a couple of points here. No one is delegated to recycling. I had a half-long conversation yesterday with Alana. Recycling comes under the department head of Public Works, so there is no one over recycling. Ms. Burns, at our last meeting, did you all have a vote to determine if you wanted the opt-in program or not?
We did.
And what was that?
The vote was negative. We voted unanimously. We did not want the opt-in program at all.
Okay, and I'd also like to remind everybody up here that as often as Mary is in city, Mrs. Burns is in City Hall, she is not an employee, but she is very, very educated and does her homework. With that being said, the intention of an RFP oftentimes is to engage with a service, a vendor, a product, whatever. And that RFP is generated out of legislation most of the time that we have voted on up here. So I will readily admit that I am confused that an RFP has gone out, given the vote from the committee said, no, we do not want an RFP. More than half of the Boma members up here were present at that meeting. I'm looking at you. I see everybody who is there. So I'm very confused that we had a no vote come out of the committee. The legislation, despite that no vote, came up here, and I appreciate the alderman bringing that forward, and we had a healthy discussion about it. That legislation was voted down. I can't even get an answer out of our Public Works Department what is going on with our recycling bins that city taxpayer funds paid for. My understanding is that they're being used as trash receptacles, which is essentially a rebate to citizens who participated in the pilot program. That's not what the intention of those receptacles was for. So I'd love to get to the bottom of that. If the recycling receptacles are being used for continued recycling with private citizens, I'm okay with that, because the intent of recycling is to lower our tipping fees, right? So there is so much chaos going on with recycling. I would love to get to the bottom of it tonight, put it to bed, not have all these backdoor deals coming down the pipeline. Our chairman of Public Works is unaware of the RFP. I'm going to be honest with you, that seems bizarre to me.
Me too.
I'm very excited to have an interim city administrator on board who can maybe get a straight answer. So, you know, when Mr. Lamar gets to the bottom of all of the information regarding this, I don't think it'll tax his memory to give a report in the next coming weeks. But you know, if our memories are taxed, we need to start being prepared for meetings. Thank you, Mrs. Burns, for being here, and I appreciate you letting us know, because I had no idea.
Alderman Woodcock, did you want to ask a question here? Okay. Alderman Skidmore, anything else?
Yeah, I would just reiterate that I'm here to do a job, as I have been for many years, for my constituency and the rest of the city of Hendersonville. Ms. Burns needs to get that recycling contract
He'll
to
send
her.
it to me.
I just want to put that on the record, and I know the mayor will do that, and I'm not here to beat up on anybody, but it does concern me when the committee, not me personally, and although I would appreciate it.
It's more important that it goes to you than it is to us.
Well, I wasn't going to say that, because I'm not that kind of person.
We all are important.
I'm not that kind of person, but yeah, it is. It's important that it goes to the committee.
I'll also obligate that we'll follow the same process we did with the other bids,
Okay,
as we have so far.
Thank you very much, and we as a committee are sorry that happened. We'll get it going. We'll try to get that to you, because we want you to look at it, and especially as me as an alderman, I want you to, because you're our representative, and we didn't appoint you to sit there
and be nice. Don't worry.
I know. And you're doing a great job.
I'm not worried about being too nice.
Okay. That's all on the recycling, Mayor. If there's someone else that had a question.
Alderman Hayes, do you have a question for Alderman Skidmore?
Yeah, on a different note, just a comment. Thank you also, as Alderman Petrelli mentioned, the stormwater project that went on in Ward 5 on Country Club Drive has been completed. It was a huge job. It took them a couple of weeks, and it looks great, and I'm just very, very appreciative to all of our city employees, but especially right now, our Public Works. Thank you so much.
Bless you for saying that, and I thank you, and the committee thank you, and we'll let everyone else know. But thank you very much for saying so.
Am I done?
Yes, sir.
Alderman Bolt,
Yes,
do you have a
ma'am.
question?
Yeah, on the recycling,
Well, wait a minute.
Dave, I think you've been on the job about 12 hours so far. So I doubt you have any information, but is there anything you can share with us on this bid process and whatnot, since most of us don't know anything about it?
Yes, sir. We had a staff meeting this morning, and Rick Mayo sat in for Marshall. Marshall was at TDOT meetings most of the day, and Rick gave a very short report, and the only thing he gave was a recycling RFP had been sent out, and that was the first that I'd heard of. Of course, this is my first day on the job, so I wasn't surprised. It didn't surprise me, but I didn't know what ramifications it had, and who knew and who didn't know. So Marshall had sickness in the family, and he asked me if he had to come tonight, and I said no. I said I'll cover any questions that come up, and if I know anything, I'll tell him, and at this point, that's all I know, but he was directed to send it out Friday, and Rick said that's what was done. So that's the information I can give you. Okay? Thank you.
Appreciate it. Alderman Woodcock, question for our chairman?
No, I wanted to be the first to ask Dave a question, and Andy stole it, so.
Alderman Robertson.
Yeah, Mayor, I would, it's the first I've heard about the RFP too, so I would appreciate if you could also send me a copy of that so that I could review it as well.
I'll do it.
And I wonder, Mayor, and I don't know what function the issuing of RFP falls under, but I wonder if it was just issued, would you object to pulling that RFP and letting Public Works to have a discussion on that along with the committee? Is that something that you wouldn't object to do?
I certainly don't object. I think that'd be up to our Public Works Chairman, our Public Works Chairman and our Public Works Director. I don't know legalities. I know that I got an email from our city attorney probably 6 months ago that the staff has the responsibility and the right to send out RFPs without going to a committee or anything else. In fact, like I said, we've had a couple, but if we want to, what about this? Why don't we continue to take information and then decide what to do with it if we hold it up at that point? Or continue to take bids and then decide what to hold up at that point?
I defer to the chairman,
Okay.
but I don't think that this is something that we need to fuss over. I think that we need to work it out, and work it out at the committee level. And so, and along with the, I don't think that my resolution failed. I think I withdrew the resolution. I think I withdrew it without a vote. So, but the effect was the same. So, Mayor, if that would be possible, maybe you could work with.
Okay. We'll do that.
Sure, we can work together on it.
Dave, let's work this out.
In full disclosure, we have a couple other RFPs out there that, I mean, just in the past week, because it happens, I mean, monthly, we have, I'll say 10 to a dozen for different projects, that a lot of times our staff, that the budget money is there, and just because of the threshold that it is. I'll give you an example, is that with the fire department, we had an RFP for wiring for low voltage, essentially the computer system. And Mary Beth handled that, and that we got bids for that, and that our staff chose somebody for that. And that's completely the process that we followed a million times. I mean, so many times. I'll get with Chairman Skidmore.
Yeah, this may be a little different because it's a little more controversial. So, just a suggestion.
Okay.
Thank you.
Alderman Sprouse, question for the chairman.
Yeah, thank you. I first just want to say I agree completely that anyone, department head, city administrator, mayor, is going to be in a tough situation because if you come and ask concept, it's going to be, well, we don't really know because we don't know how much it's going to cost. And you're not going to know until you get RFPs. Dr. Robinson took a lot of what I wanted to say. I think the issue we're dealing with right now is because it is so controversial, because we had a garbage contract that changed on us during the RFP period, and it came back with things that was not what was in the original proposal. We can talk about firefighters. I mean, we have the fire chief comes to us and says he wants to buy a new truck, and he puts out an RFP before he comes to us to say how much he needs to have it spent. But if the fire chief had a couple of bad purchases on fire trucks, bad RFP processes, purchasing processes, I think the Public Safety Committee would like to be a little bit more involved at the beginning of that process. So I think as long as we're not obligating ourselves to anything, as long as the RFP is to help us kind of budget future decisions, so we're ready as part of the next budget year, I think that's appropriate. But I sure would hate to have the situation where all of a sudden we're being told, vote yes or no, and if we don't vote, we're against recycling. Thank you.
Alderman Brown, question for Chairman Skidmore?
Question, statement, I guess. First thing, this may be for John, not Chairman Skidmore. I guess my statement would be, I think the idea of pulling this is a good idea simply because your bid closing is December the 27th, and we're not meeting that week. Public Works is not going to meet till the following month. It also talks about bid opening in here during that period of time. So if we're going to open bids, then most people are going to assume we're going to let a bid. So I do think it would be a good idea to go back to the recycling committee who did not know anything about this, nor did their liaison report on it. So I would say that, and I would also like to say, I just got done reading the city website, and this is the only RFP that is open. Thank you.
Chairman Campbell, capital projects.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I just want to let everyone know the city has received the $1.2 million grant called the Hazard Mitigation Grant from FEMA. It's issued through TEMA, and Marshall and I attended a meeting Monday downtown with TEMA and discussed the 29 properties we have in Hendersonville that have been flooded and are repetitive flooding. We have 3 that are severe flooding properties. Those 3 will qualify for 100% federal government money to pay off, to buy out, because they are what they call severe, and every time it rains, basically they flood. So the federal government would just like to do away with those properties completely. And what that means is, once they are demolished, and taken back to the natural state, there will be no buildings allowed on that property, but it becomes the city's property, and we will be able to put a playground for the neighborhood there, dog park, just a passive park, or whatever type of park we might want to do there. But we cannot put any buildings or any structures on that property once it comes into the city of Hendersonville's ownership. And like I said, there's 29 properties across the city. I was trying to get the list from Marshall today to talk about them, because some on Southburn Drive, Savely Court, Lakeside Park Drive, Private Drive even had an address that was listed there. I was totally shocked, some of the addresses I saw on that list, and I'm like, wow. But if they're repetitive, they can be at 90-10 split with the federal government, and others will be at 80-20. But I suggest that we go after the 100% ones for sure, and we also try to accommodate the 90-10, because we do have a little over $1.2 million from the government to address those issues, and they've been a long time coming. You can ask Mr. Hudson or Mr. Giles about that. So just want to let everyone know. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's my.
Alderman Waters, do you have a question for capital projects?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Alderman Campbell,
Yes, sir.
since this is in our Ward
Yes.
6, is there any way you could send me a update on the FEMA, what they said, what they agreed to do?
Yes, sir.
Not that I'm questioning you.
Sure.
But I've got 2 calls since all this started.
Yes, sir.
And you know how anxious they are.
Oh, I do.
And I have talked to 2, and they don't want to sell. So I need something from FEMA, from you, to talk to them about. I know what I've been told, that they can reject it, but they'll lose their flood insurance, won't they?
I was asked about that as well, and no, sir. There's no, just because FEMA gives you an offer to buy out and you refuse it, you do not lose your right to flood insurance.
You do not lose it?
No, sir. And you can still maintain that insurance. You have the right to go out as a citizen and purchase insurance.
Can you get me
I
that?
specifically asked the lady the other day when we were having that conversation.
That's good.
That question.
I'm glad to hear that, because I was misinformed.
And I even asked 2 times to make sure I was hearing right, because that's not what I had heard previously. I heard when the federal government comes in and wants to do it, you're out.
They don't lose that coverage?
No, sir.
Could you send me that, sir?
I sure will.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Alderman Waters, thank you. Alderman Strauss, you have a question for our chairman.
Yeah, I wanted to say first, thank you for being our advocate with FEMA on this issue. Secondly, we could put this on a future agenda for capital projects, something we
Yes.
may want to consider.
Yes.
If we do have the opportunity for a 9-to-1 match with federal government for those other funds, I think one thing we may want to consider is the feasibility of using green space money. We have the 1% that we have. The next couple of years, a significant portion of that's going to be going to pay towards the Beatty purchase. But then we have the other portion that we put in the budget this year, and there'll be a little bit each year. If there's the possibility, if we're turning that into passive space, could we use that money towards those purchases, and then basically leveraging $1 into $10 by getting the federal match?
We can, and we can also use stormwater utility funds to do
Okay.
that as well.
Cool.
Because this is
Thank you.
stormwater issues that are being addressed.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Chairman Campbell, thank you. Planning Commission, Alderman Woodcock.
Thank you. Before Mass, a question about a capital project.
Sure.
At our January meeting, can I get an official report on the trestle, either from the mayor, Dave? I'm not sure who to even ask
Sure.
at this point, but like a true official report,
Yes, sir.
new timeline now that the grant was declined and all that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. We met last week with the Planning Commission. Very light agenda. We approved the Norman Creek Phase 2 final plat, and most importantly, the site plan for the Dunkin' Donuts and Popeye's Chicken. Thank you.
Appreciate that, Alderman Woodcock. Alderman Cunningham, Census Committee.
No report, Mayor.
Appreciate that. Dave Lamar, something called City Administrator Report.
Okay, first day on the job, went pretty well. Finalized all paperwork and details this morning, late this afternoon, and had some glitches in the permanent city administrator's advertisement goes out tomorrow. I appreciate Peter and Chris working on that for me and getting me that out. Going to leave it open approximately 6 weeks, and then we'll continue to get with MTAS and find out what the next step is and where we go from there. I had a staff meeting this morning. I was called on late notice because I wasn't officially on duty till this morning, so I sent a notice out, and a couple guys had already had plans to do it. Marshall had TDOT meeting, and Mickey had a community coffee thing, but I met with both of them today in different times. We just went through some order of business and how things have changed a little bit. I'm going to try to meet this week with each department when they have the departmental staff meetings. I met with planning already, and it went very well. I spent about 20 or 30 minutes in there just explaining the kind of different path we're going down. I'd like to meet with the board of aldermen sometime between now and Christmas and just sit down and chat about the responsibilities. Gary Jekyll suggested I do that, and he said he would be willing to come and help explain responsibilities and communication, things like that. And I do want to open up communication, just like the report tonight. I'll try to send you bullet points at the end of every week from each department. I'll request from them 2 or 3 bullet points that are going on in the department, the big ticket items. I'll forward it to you and things like that. And then, like, if you have a request from a department head, I appreciate if you just carbon copy me right now along with the department head. What I don't want to do is make sure, like, somebody that's in the middle of something very task-oriented and he's got timeline to do with a budget or something, that if you request something, I got to have it today, he may not be able to do it today. And so he and I will get together, or the department head and I will get together and say, well, can you give him a couple of days and we'll work together. So I think it's going to work out fine. From what I've seen, my last point of order here, last one I've seen, we've got some good employees there. Got some really good employees, some knowledgeable, some good employees, some real loyal employees, and some people that are hard workers and do a great job. And on my first day, I figured out that I can depend on them. Just requested that they do their jobs and stay within those guidelines of the rules and regs, and we'll get along just fine. So I appreciate your confidence in me, and we're going to move forward. Thank you very much.
Next, we have Resolution 2019-69. This is a resolution regarding the funding of compensation for the interim city administrator.
Sorry, I'm in the queue. Could we take a 5-minute break till 9:05?
We have a motion, a second, to take a 5-minute break. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. That passed unanimously. We'll be back at 9:05. Okay, thank y'all. That was a elongated 5-minute break. We're back, and we have Resolution 2019-69. This is a resolution regarding the funding of compensation for the interim city administrator. Alderman Waters. I'm sorry, we have a motion and a second. Alderman Waters.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Chairman, I have some issues about this position, which I'd like to share with the board as well as our people here. The first that comes to my mind is, and we all know the city of Hendersonville is required
Alderman
to be...
Waters, hold on one second. I'm sorry. No, I'm not. You're not the problem. It's some noise that was coming from down here. I appreciate it, Chairman Alderman Skidmore. You are not the problem.
All right, thank you.
Alderman Waters.
Am I ready?
Yes. Thank you.
I'll start over. I just have some issues about the interim city administrator, and I've tried to do my research, and I've talked to people at the state. Excuse me. And I'm going to read what I've received this past week. The city of Hendersonville is required to be an equal employment opportunity under federal law. If you have a complaint against a state or local government that involves race, color, religion, sex, national origin, or age 40 or above, this agent is covered by the law. First, the city must post the position of interim city administrator regardless of the fact the city has yet to complete all requirements under state law to create the position of city administrator. Instead of posting the position, we've talked to a couple of people. As we know from city employees and interim manager, Mr. Charles Hasty expressed his disappointment that his experience and qualifications, he was not advised of the opening that he might apply for. So there was a job opening posted on the city website. I'm sorry, there was no job posted on the city website, nor was it advertised in the state of Tennessee website under Hendersonville and Sumner County. And I have the letter from Mr. Hasty, and I think each member of the board got one too. The other thing that concerns me is that from the state, and it reads, I have a copy of the city municipal code with information regarding TCA 654-501 through 512. And I see with this requirement, the state law, I see why this is required by state law before it's enforceable. That being said, is no legal city administrator position since TCA 6-54-501, 512 has not been done. Therefore, there can be no interim city administrator because TCA 6-4101, duties of the city administration, has not been codified within the municipal code. Codification is required at every level of government, aka known as putting the law onto the books and providing the codification to those that enforce and or defend the law against those that have been accused of violating the law. Until the position of city administrator has been codified and legally established, the city cannot, per state law, hire an interim city administrator. I have a question here that I sent to HR. And I asked him, did we request resumes from anyone in regard to the interim CA position? His reply, the answer to your question, we did not request resumes from anyone for the interim CA position. Not a soul. My question, we violated the EEO law that I just read to you. So, Mr. Chairman, I only have one other thing that I want to share with the people. The TCA 6-54-501 through 512, before the city administrator position is legally, under state law, you cannot appoint or hire an interim city administrator until the position of city administration has been established. I so move. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Gary, can we borrow you real quickly? I'm going to ask that we suspend rules to hear from Gary Jekyll. Probably a couple people have some questions for him. A motion and a second. All those in favor of suspending the rules here from Gary Jekyll, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed, please say no. That passes unanimously. I need to explain a little bit what's happened. So the reason we're dealing with this resolution is because the resolution we passed 2 weeks ago, as was told to us by an attorney, was not a proper resolution, did not follow state law. That's why we're having this resolution we have now, is because the resolution we passed 2 weeks ago is not proper. And my comments had nothing to do with the person filling the position at all. This is about following state law and how we spend taxpayer dollars. And some people up here might call this a delay tactic, and I fully anticipate that. In fact, they're going to cite other times that we used a resolution instead of ordinance to appropriate money. And that's what was part of the problem with the, that was really the best way to handle this. We should have had an ordinance begin with to appropriate money for an interim city administrator, and that didn't happen. Instead, we used a resolution, and we got our hands slapped, and the city found out that then we had to do another resolution. But we're still in the same situation. We need an ordinance to appropriate the money correctly. And so this isn't a delay tactic. Like I said, some people are going to cite sometimes when we use resolutions to appropriate money. But about a year ago, I asked our city attorney if that was the proper way to go. Now, just because we did it in the past doesn't mean we did it legally and we did it correctly, which is why I asked, like I said, about a year ago about appropriating money with resolutions. And that's the problem here, is that this is a resolution, and this is going to appropriate money. And like I said, this is about how we spend taxpayer dollars. It's not about the individual who's filling the role. Gary, you and I had a conversation in my office. We've had many conversations in my office, I know. And I believe you mentioned that you talked to candidates at the ICMA convention back in mid-October for the interim city administrator position. Is that?
Yes.
Okay. And that was back, like I said, mid-October. You felt like that was a good place to look for candidates for an interim city administrator because there were people there with experience as a city administrator, among other reasons.
Yes.
Okay. And we also talked about how important experience was for a city administrator would be for an interim city administrator.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And I believe that you said that a department head wouldn't bring, or former department head, wouldn't bring the experience that was really best for a city administrator.
I think something along that line. I think I said someone who'd been in the role of city administrator has the experience that department heads have not had the time to have in that role.
Okay. Appreciate that. And again, this is back in mid-October with the ICMA convention that was going on. Did you recommend an interim city administrator for the city at that time?
I did.
Who did you recommend that to?
Who did I recommend it to?
Yeah.
To the general committee.
Okay. I don't believe that we ever voted for an interim city administrator back in October.
No, you did not.
Okay. That's not really.
But that was a discussion that was had in this room.
Okay. When you mentioned that the interim city administrator come up in general committee, when did that come up in general committee?
Well, actually, I think it didn't come up until after the ICMA conference.
Okay. And we've heard a lot of reasons, justifications for an interim city administrator, but like you just mentioned, we didn't hear many of those until after the ICMA conference, until after somebody was looking for an interim city administrator. So those justifications sort of came after the effort to find an interim city administrator. So we were looking for a solution before we actually knew what the problems were. So who suggested that you seek an interim city administrator at the conference?
Nobody.
Nobody. You did that on your own?
Yes.
Okay.
Based on the conversations that took place in this boardroom while I watched the video and could determine that that was a topic that was going to be coming up.
Okay. Before the ICMA conference, you watched the video that suggested you should go find an interim city administrator?
Yes.
Okay. Was there something specific in those meetings before the ICMA conference that led you to go find an interim city administrator for us?
I believe that there was actually a conversation that took place among the aldermen about the need and the desire to have an interim city administrator now.
Okay. And that was a board meeting that you heard that?
Yeah.
Okay. And during that conversation between you and me, I think you also said that the board would need to pass an ordinance in order to appropriate money for the interim city administrator. Is that correct?
No, I said you'd have to do a budget amendment.
Okay.
That's what I said.
Okay. Is an ordinance required for a budget amendment or is a resolution?
That depends on where the money is coming from, because the state law would allow you to utilize money
within departments that's already been appropriated as a part of your appropriation ordinance, you could move money from one area of that departmental budget to another area of the departmental budget,
Okay. Okay.
which is what you've done with resolutions all the time.
Yeah, in the past, we've done that, yeah. So I want to read an email, and I'm happy to provide documentation to anybody, because I think it's important, the things we're going to talk about here, and the things that we're going to throw out, that we offer documentation. I'm happy to provide this to anybody. And this is from Alicia Hodge, who works with Gary, who is an attorney for MTAS. I'm going to read it right now, and then I'll get it to you after that. So this is on December 5th. Good afternoon, Mayor Clary, good afternoon. We have conferred within the office,
According to Robert's rules, it requires that you hand it out now, so could you please take a brief break and hand it out so we can read it all over again?
Would y'all like to take a 5-minute break for me to go make copies of this? Okay, we've got a motion. We've got a motion to take a 5-minute break. Do we have a second?
Second.
Oh, I think you made the motion.
Second.
Okay?
I'll just go make copies so you guys can.
Okay. Okay. So are we rescinding the motion to take a break? Okay. I need to read it first, though.
Take a picture of it.
Okay, that works. You want to do that? Okay.
Let's just take a break.
Daryl, I need to read it from that. So,
Take a picture.
so after I read it, we can make copies of this. Assume. Okay, do you want to take a break, or do you want me to read it? I can't read it when somebody else has it.
A 3-minute break rather than discussing it for 10 minutes.
Okay.
I'll go get copies.
Okay. Here, the problem is, this is the only copy, so I need to read it first, but they're saying I shouldn't read it. We should make
That's why I
copies.
say I'll get copies while y'all carry on business.
Okay. Okay, who made the motion to take a 3-minute break? Okay, who made the second? Okay. All those in favor of taking a 3-minute break, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. Who said no? Alderman Waters said no. Okay, we'll take a 3-minute break. I certainly hope whenever anybody else brings something to the board that they're citing, that they will also make copies for us, considering that that is now a new requirement that we've never had before. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue where I was. It should be coming. I believe there are 3 or 4 sheets. There are 5 sheets. They're in stacks. They're already collated. How many pages are the original? 2, 3, 4. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, I believe. The reason it's hard for me is because I've got some notes for myself to speak, which I assume that y'all don't expect copies of those as well, because I'm about to say them. So I'm making copies of the emails that I think most of you have already seen. That's what it seems like is what you're asking for. again, I hope this becomes the norm that when somebody cites information from a written source, that they provide copies, and I hope it becomes the norm as well, is that when somebody presents something and prevents supposed facts, that they also prevent documentation. No, they were collated when they came out. Should we go on? Sure. Okay. So as I mentioned, some of the things that Alderman Waters brought up about the reason this resolution is in front of us is because the previous resolution was determined that there are some legal questions with it. And so after we passed that, I then responded to Alicia Hodge at MTAS, and she responded to me. Good afternoon. We have conferred within the office, and I suggest that the start date for the interim administrator be pushed back until an amendment to the budget is passed by ordinance. While I understand that the funding for this position is being shifted from one department to another and will not require the appropriation of new money, I still think that an amendment to the budget is necessary to fund the position, since it will be in a department in which the funds were not originally appropriated. I encourage you or city staff to contact the Comptroller's office and ask the same question, since the Comptroller's office is the entity directly interested in municipal budgets. I think it is important that the final determination on this issue come from staff within that office. So, then I forwarded that to our city attorney and asked, what do you suggest on this? I did not hear back from our city attorney. So I asked another time, could you contact the Comptroller's office, as Alicia suggested, and get their opinion to us in writing? Then our city attorney wrote back, after you requested my advice on how to move forward with the funding of the interim city administrator, I consulted with MTAS. We have agreed on a way to fund the position without the need to amend the city ordinance, without the need to amend the budget ordinance at this time. The board can pass a resolution funding the interim city administrator with funding currently appropriated in the executive department for salaries. At a later time, the budget ordinance can be amended by an ordinance moving the unexpended funds in public works or finance to the executive budget for salaries. You also have that. Notably, what was not included in that email from our city attorney was a written opinion from the Comptroller's office, and that was something that was suggested from MTAS. Again, MTAS said, I encourage you or your city staff to contact the Comptroller's office and to ask the same question, and then when I forwarded that to our city attorney, I asked to get that in writing. We did not get that. What we got was one side of a conversation afterward. We didn't get any documentation on that. In talking with a person at the Comptroller's office, they directed me to a couple things. And first, they let me know that in order to do this, we need a budget amendment. In order to have a budget amendment, it requires an ordinance. We heard that from an attorney 2 weeks ago. We heard that from Alicia Hodge, and now I heard it today from a person at the Comptroller's office. And I asked her if she could point me to where she found that, and it's actually very simple. It's a series of frequently asked questions, and it's question number 1. And you see that you have also. The answer to question number 1, how do municipalities amend their budgets? Municipalities must amend their budgets by ordinance prior to increasing spending for any appropriation. And then the next item that she mentioned to me was, the next question, because monies must be appropriated prior to being spent, budget amendments must be adopted to authorize increase in spending before the spending occurs. In the executive department, under this resolution, we will increase spending. So let me read this again. Because monies must be appropriated prior to being spent, budget amendments must be adopted to authorize increases in spending before the spending occurs. No provision is made to permit authority to spend after the fact. We were told by an attorney 2 weeks ago, we were told by an attorney for MTAS, we were told by a person working for the Comptroller's office, and if you pull up this website right here, Frequently Asked Questions 1 and 2, shows us that we need an ordinance to go ahead and do this. Now, some of you have heard sort of moaning that we don't need an ordinance because we're going to pay for this later on with some money from some other departments. Gary, last question for you. Is there any guarantee that at least 7 members of this board will later pass an ordinance to move money from another department to fund this?
Well, you're missing part of the equation.
Okay. Oh, sorry, you're right. Sorry about that. Okay. You're on now.
Oh, okay. Let me try that again. You're missing part of the equation.
Okay.
You're making an assumption at this point that you're actually going to be exceeding the appropriation that exists under the executive budget, executive department budget. That may or may not be the case at this point in time, which is precisely why you all, as an organization, have moved money within the department by resolutions on not just a few cases, but a lot of cases. Primarily because you have an appropriation for each department that is a one amount. It is not, from the point of view of what your appropriations and what your budget is, it doesn't segregate out that the comptroller can see what you're spending money on. You've actually had resolutions that have taken money from various projects over here and moved them to a project over here within the same department. You can do that by resolution. And the comptroller's office agrees with us that that can be done.
Can I go back to my question?
And I'm about to circle back around to it.
Okay.
You can, if the need comes up at some point before the end of the fiscal year, you can have a budget ordinance that amends the executive department budget by way of an ordinance. So long as you get it done before the end of the fiscal year, which is the other thing that the comptroller's office says.
Okay. So is there a guarantee that at least 7 members of this board are going to pass an ordinance to move the money?
Well, I think if you don't, then I think you're going to have a problem with the comptroller and findings as a part of the audit that come when you have the auditors come and audit your books at the end of the year.
Okay. So we need to have an ordinance in order to satisfy what the comptroller is going to need at some point.
Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe.
So
that's if you're actually going to spend, and you can accurately predict that you're going to overspend what you have in terms of dollars within the executive department.
Well, I think that's actually predicted in the resolution, because the resolution says later on, and the email from our city attorney says later on, we'll move that money over. So I don't think that's a presumption I'm making.
It says if necessary.
Hold on, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to go on.
Now, what does it actually say?
Let's see here. Well,
what does it actually say?
Let's pull it up here.
Because I've looked at it, and I'm kind of agreeing with the city attorney.
Okay.
I think I know what it says.
Okay. So
but I want to make sure.
Transferring funds from the Public Works Department and Finance Department to the executive is repealed. Ahead of that, let's see. If necessary, the city's budget ordinance.
That's the key.
Ordinance 2019-22 can be amended to move the expended salary funds from Public Works Finance Department. So if there's a presumption that we don't need it, I think it's a pretty good assumption that we are going to need it. And that's not really a question. I get that. But I'm sure we're going to hear some outrage up here, and I'm sure that at least one alderman is going to accuse me of obstructing the majority of the board. And I'll tell you, I am obstructing the majority of the board because the majority is not acting according to Tennessee law.
According to you, Mayor, not according to the law. According to you, you're not a lawyer, and this is ridiculous. Sit here and listen to this long enough. You're obstructing the will of this board.
Again, I'm happy to share the documentation from this, having heard from one attorney that says we need an ordinance, having heard from the MTS attorney that says we need an ordinance, having cited the frequently asked questions for the
Are you
comptroller.
going to give this board's attorney an opportunity to speak, Mayor?
No, he's not.
I guess not.
So, well, I'm going to
if I
finish,
might.
if you could, okay. I mean, very simply, the comptroller staff said, if we are changing the total expenditure of the department, we
Stop.
must amend the budget. Okay.
Stop.
Hold on.
Stop right there.
Okay.
We're not.
Hold on, Gary.
Two words you just said.
Okay. Well, hold on, Gary, let me finish here. I got
No, I'm not going to,
Gary,
because I
Gary,
want you
I've got
to,
the
I
floor.
want you to focus on what you just said.
Gary, I've got the floor. I'll come right back to you. Okay, okay.
Then I don't have to stand here.
So, okay, so total expenditure is probably the key, Gary. Total expenditure, I assume, is the key. Go ahead.
Excuse me?
I assume total expenditure are the two words that you're talking about.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, okay.
It is.
Okay.
You've not exceeded the total expenditure.
Okay.
You don't have to do an ordinance until such time as you believe
Okay.
completely and with certainty that you're going to exceed that total expenditure.
Okay, I appreciate that. Okay. So, we've heard, like I said, we've heard, 2 weeks ago, we heard now, the correct way to do this is with an ordinance. So, so we need to do this as an ordinance. Alderman Strauss. Gary, thank you.
Thank you, Gary. I'm not going to express outrage. I'm going to express disappointment. And in a way, I'm going to express a little bit of relief. Because these type of conversations are the types of conversations our city department heads and our city employees have been having on a regular basis for more than 2 years. Their professional experience, their professional training, their knowledge of the state law, federal laws, and city policies are ignored, and we get hit in the audits by that. The question could be asked, yes. Do we expect that the board would take appropriate actions? Should we have to pass an ordinance in the future? Well, what you're asking is the board going to be responsible? Is the board going to honor a commitment they make with a vote right now? I think so, because I think the actions of this board, overwhelming majority, if not every member of this board, has been to take those appropriate actions and to honor commitments. And that when we sign contracts, we pay bills, and that when we hire employees, we treat them fairly. I'm not an attorney, but I'm sitting right here with a copy of Tennessee Code Annotated 6-65-209 that talks about transfer of money, and it says the governing body, and by the way, I think you all have a copy of this.
Everybody's got a copy. Everybody's got a copy.
Right. I've never been questioned by what I was reading, was it was accurate or not. But I have known that we have had things read to us that were found out later were not on the page. The governing body, by appropriate resolution or ordinance, may authorize the budget officer to transfer monies from one appropriation to another within the same fund, subject to such limitations and procedures as it may prescribe. Resolution or ordinance. I don't know. I'm very frustrated that we're having this discussion right now. We could have had this discussion in committee earlier when our finance director and our personnel director and MTask representative were all sitting around the table and we said, Mayor, do you have any questions about this? And he said, no. I wish we didn't even have to argue about putting this on the agenda because we were told, well, we just got it this morning. This is a copy of the packet that I received as a member of the General Committee. This packet was prepared prior to Friday and was sent to me on Friday along with the board agenda. Other members of committees, you get packets for your committees prior to the meeting. This resolution is in the packet. So that means that the sponsors got with city staff, put it together, it was reviewed, in time for it to be put into a packet on Friday afternoon to be sent out to us Friday afternoon. However, this is my committee packet. Same time, every one of us got the board packet, put together by the same staff, reviewed by the same staff, and for some reason, this resolution is not in this packet. Normally, what you would have seen is it would have been put in there, and then in parentheses behind it, it would have said, subject to approval of the board to add it to the agenda. And everyone would have had this Friday. Can't say that it wasn't emailed, wasn't made available by Friday, because every one of us in General Committee got it in our packet. And every one of y'all got a copy of our agenda to see that it was there. So why didn't we get this on Friday? Why didn't we get this on Monday? Why did we finally get an email from the mayor about this just before lunch today? It's almost like it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. I had someone send me something today from social media. I really do try to stay off Facebook, but every so often someone will see something, and it's someone, Mayor, that has been quoted as being your bulldog, making the accusation that the city attorney and I were going to be cramming this down the board's throat tonight. All I did was put on the agenda, asked to put on the agenda tonight what one of the sponsors of the resolution, who was on our committee, asked for us to do to put it on the agenda. And the city attorney is only answering the questions that you asked. I don't know what the conspiracy is. I don't know the source, the person who seems to know all, but it only ends up being about half the story. I don't know where her source is, but it tends to be wrong. At best, it ends up being half right. I know Gary Jekyll. I've known him for a long time. And there have been times that Gary Jekyll has told me things I didn't want to hear. But it didn't make it any less right. It just meant that we had to find out a different way to do something. I can say the same thing about Mr. Bradley. Now, I would like to hear from the city attorney, because if you're going to ask him to comment on this in email, I would like for him to be able to respond to all of us, to know where his conversations were, who they were with, and what the result of those conversations were.
You do that now? Alderman Swells, you want to do that now?
Mr. Bradley?
Okay, go ahead, John.
I've talked to people at the Controller's office, including the person in local government. Her name is Jean Saw. It's spelled S-U-H, if you want to know. And I discussed with her what we were doing here about this resolution, and that's before the board tonight, and she had no problem with it. She understood it. There's a disagreement about whether or not this all has to be done within one department or another department. I get that. I'm looking at the statute that says, first of all, you've all got a copy of this. If you'll look at TCA 6-56206, this is the statute that governs the city of Hendersonville and the budget process. It's called the Municipal Budget Law of 1982. And it says the governing body of each municipality is caused to be published their annual budget. Goes on to say, shall include the following: revenues and expenditures for the following governmental funds. 1, general. 2, streets and public works. 3, general purpose school. And 4, debt service. Those are the 4 funds that it talks about. We don't have a school system, so we've only got 3 funds. We've got our street public work projects committee, we've got our general fund, which we appropriate money from periodically, and we've got our debt service fund. That's TCA 6-56206. Then you go 3 sections further, and it says, the governing body by appropriate resolution or ordinance may authorize the budget officer to transfer monies from the one appropriation to another within the same fund, in this case the general fund, subject to such limitations as procedures as the governing body may prescribe. We've heard about we're increasing spending. We're not increasing spending. We're moving money that's already been appropriated to pay for the city administrator. This whole conversation is really quite bizarre. We do this all the time, but all of a sudden, this big issue, and we don't have a problem with the controller's office. We don't have a problem with MTAS. I talked to Mr. Ralph Cross today about this, who works for MTAS, is in the finance office. Everybody there has signed off on it's okay. As long as we make it from the executive department, it's okay. We can disagree about whether we can transfer from the finance department to executive department. That's okay. The state law says what it says. But what we're doing tonight is we're passing it from the executive department to answer all these concerns and questions. No one has told me, from the people I've talked to at the controller's office or at MTS, that we have to pass some sort of a new ordinance to do this. We fund positions periodically out of money we've appropriated. That's what we're doing here tonight. It's a real simple thing, and if the mayor wants to say he's not obstructing, well, I think he did say he was obstructing, and that's okay. That's his prerogative. But 7 votes can make us move forward, and I would suggest that we vote on this resolution and move forward.
Alderman Edwards.
Okay. Okay, our city attorney's opinion is really the only legal opinion that matters. I mean, I guess, or I assume that this resolution complies with all laws?
Yes, sir. In my opinion, it does.
Okay. I don't know why we have to talk about this anymore.
Neither do I.
I just called the question. I don't know who's in the queue.
Okay, we have a motion to call
We
have a motion to call the question in a second. Was there a second?
I'm sorry.
Was-
I didn't know I was giving up the floor.
Okay, go ahead.
Alderman Strauss, go ahead.
I did want to answer some questions. Some questions were asked by the mayor about about when did this happen and when the notices were and things like that. I want to give you some hard dates. Let me get my packet, the right packet back up.
Alderman Robertson, go ahead.
Was there a motion made to call the question?
It was withdrawn. If you want to make that motion, that's entirely up to you. But actually, no, Alderman Strauss has the floor.
This was first, the idea of the city administrator, an interim city administrator, was first introduced on November 12th at a general committee meeting. And that was there was some question about whether it was a special called meeting and anything could be added to the agenda. There was a discussion item on there about city administrator. We wanted to get an update about where the ad was and things like that. The sponsors came to us at that meeting and said, we have this. At that meeting, I said, let's have discussion about this, but let's not vote on it because it wasn't on the agenda. At that meeting, Mr. Jekyll brought someone that he thought would be a good candidate for that position, just to let us know if you put out the hire, just to let you know there's someone who could do something. Because the first question I would have is what professional would come take a 6-month appointment? We had a second meeting, a special called meeting held in this room on the 18th. At that meeting, we voted to recommend hiring the city administrator. By that time, the person who was a candidate had withdrawn his name from consideration. At least one person, if not two, suggested Mr. Lamarb. I don't know if Mr. Lamarb was here or not. And I said, that's fine. Dave's a good guy. Let's just say we're going to do the hire, and we're not going to talk about the individual because someone else may want to put their name into consideration. And it was at the board meeting, I guess the next day, that we had some conversation. It was at our next board meeting that we had the discussion. And that's the timeline. Thank you.
Alderman Edwards.
Well, unless the vice mayor or anybody has a burning desire to talk, I mean, I'll renew.
I'm good.
I don't know if anybody can add anything else to this conversation, then I'll renew my motion to call the question.
We have a motion to call the question.
A second.
And a second. This requires a 2/3 vote. All those in favor of calling the questions, please signify. Okay. Okay, and then we don't have to take a vote if that's okay with you. Okay. All those in favor of Resolution 2019-69, please signify by saying aye. When Kay calls your name, those opposed, please say no. But hold on one second. I got an email that people on TV cannot hear how we're voting, so I'm going to turn on everybody's microphone so people can hear how we're voting. Go ahead.
Oates,
Aye.
Brown,
Aye.
Campbell,
Aye.
Cunningham,
Yes.
Edwards,
Yes.
Hayes,
Yes.
Petrelli,
Yes.
Robertson,
Yes.
Skidmore,
No.
Sprouse,
Yes.
Waters,
No.
Woodcock,
Aye.
Clary.
No. That passes 10-3. Next on our agenda is Resolution 2019-60. This
You're
resolution
illegal.
asks the Tennessee General Assembly to amend Title VI, Chapter 3, Section 110 of Tennessee Code annotated to allow the city of Hendersonville to establish term limits for the offices of mayor and alderman. Let me turn off everybody here. Alderman Woodcock. We have a motion.
Second.
And a second.
Still me?
Yep, go ahead.
I have a couple comments, and I'll hand it over to any questions that anyone has. First, I've been asked why the co-sponsors were listed as they were. Just so everyone knows, I didn't seek any co-sponsors. Two of them mentioned that they want to be a co-sponsor at the general committee, and one other sent an email to city staff to be added. I personally want everyone to be a co-sponsor. If anyone else wants to be a co-sponsor, just speak up and you can be added. I definitely am not trying to eliminate anybody. And then second thing is, it's been mentioned that this is to target a certain person or a couple people. Just for this to be on the record, so when I was first elected, this is one of the first questions I asked about. This was before I knew anyone on the board, really. And since then, I'll be honest, when we walk out that door, I don't think about anybody else up here on the board, except maybe Jim's wife. So this is not a personal attack on anyone. Everyone sitting up here, your time is grandfathered in, so you're on the level playing field as anyone else. So again, if you want to be a co-sponsor, speak up, and this is nothing personal about anybody. And then I'll answer any questions anyone has, and then maybe make a comment at the end.
Alderman Woodcock, thank you. Alderman Waters.
Thank you, Mayor. Last couple of days, I've got some calls, and I think a lot of people don't understand what we're here tonight to do. So for the record, I want to clarify that for the people here, for the people that maybe watches it on TV later, what we're here tonight to do. And it's so important that we get everything correct. No social media, no nothing, So, Mayor, correct me if I'm wrong. Tonight, this board will only vote to ask the state to amend our charter to allow a referendum on term limits, right or wrong?
I believe, Alderman Woodcock, you're probably better to answer that one.
Okay.
Yes, this is the first step in allowing citizens to vote for term limits.
Okay.
Once that's approved by the state, it will come back to this board to vote on the actual legislation, correct or wrong?
Yes.
Thank you. If that passes, voters will be able to decide for themselves in a citywide election next November, right?
Yes.
Thank you. So, Alderman Woodcock, to me, this is the first step in changing the direction our city is going. Although tonight is not the time to discuss the merits of term limits, it's now time to open the door so the discussion, because it's way overdue and our citizens deserve better. Thank you, Alderman Woodcock, and thank you, Mayor.
Alderman Waters, thank you. Alderman Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. A question for any one of the four sponsors, or maybe all four of them. Why do you feel term limits is good for the citizenry in Hendersonville, Tennessee?
Alderman Woodcock, you looked at your microphone first, so I called on you.
That's fine. Easy for me. It's been mentioned earlier, new blood. If I look at my tenure on this board and count what I consider the most praising achievements, if you took an honest look at it, most of them were led, if not driven, by some of the newer members. And I don't think that's by accident. I think people have ideas, they come in, boom. So term limits foster new blood. And then at the end of the day, if it wasn't for the referendum, I wouldn't be bringing it up. Those are the two main points for me.
Alderman Brown.
So new blood is basically new blood
For me,
for you. Okay, I'm gonna speak against it, but I'm asking the other three,
I'll speak when you're done.
tell me why you think it's good.
Alderman
I'm gonna
Bolt.
tell you why I think it's bad.
Alderman Bolt, did you want to, you have no obligation
I'd
to.
like to go after you.
You wanna go after me?
Okay. Alderman Robertson.
Pardon me, I lit you up.
All right, I'll go.
Okay, Alderman Bolt.
Mine will take us just a few more minutes than that, but over the last several days, I've gotten a lot of feedback from a lot of different sources. Not many people, I mean, you guys are interested, and I think people in general might be interested. I haven't gotten a lot of feedback from, people aren't calling me, they're not emailing me and saying, hey, this is really a hot topic, but it is a hot topic for some people, so, I understand that. Having said that, there's a few issues that I have with it, and I'm about 50-50 on it right now. One of them being is, I really think that if you've got a good alderman, you really, really ought to be able to keep your alderman. So if somebody's there for 2 or 3 terms and then all of a sudden there's nobody running, I mean, you're done. I mean, you're going to have somebody that may not even want to do it, but stepping forward. And chances are, as much as some people might not like some aldermen, most of these guys are doing a pretty good job. That's why they got elected, in the first place. The other thing I hear from people is, term limits at all levels. Well, I understand it at the national level. I don't even know how you go to Washington and not come away corrupt. I have no idea. And that's why people go there and they have $100,000 and they come out with $100 million. I mean, obviously, I'm just telling you, that ain't happening here. So I'm making $600 gross a month, and it is a fraction of my expenses. So, and I'll probably donate my $600 next year to charity, because it doesn't mean anything. And when you hear people say stuff like, ridiculous stuff like, the developers are lining your pockets, it's the most ridiculous thing you can ever imagine in your life. It is stupid. And so I have to put up with that crap. And then a couple other things. Somebody mentioned Nashville. Nashville's got some issues. They've got some issues because they don't have institutional knowledge. So they've got people that are coming and going, and they haven't been there very long, and that's an issue. In Gallatin, some people don't know that, but it's term limits just for that. So if it's term limit, if you're in a ward, it's a term limit, but you can go and then you can run for an open spot as an alderman. So it's not really at large, sorry. So it's not really the same kind of issue. But I'll just come back to, when I first came on board, not unlike Darrell, Alderman Woodcock, I didn't have a lot of issues on my plate that was important to me because I didn't know anything. I was appointed. You guys keep pointing that out to me all the time. I was appointed. So people thought enough of me to bring me on board so that I could learn. And I think by all accounts, even people that don't like me up here, I've learned fairly quickly. And so I thought that term limits was important at that time. And I really haven't come off that all that much. I've learned some other stuff that's kind of made me rethink the situation, but I have always self-selected out of everything I've ever done. So I've never stayed till I got beat. I never stayed till I got stale. I just left. And I think voids generally are filled, not always, but I think they're generally filled. The issue, and you all have already heard it many times, the institutional knowledge is what's very important to me. And institutional knowledge is people that have been around for a long time, so that I can go to them and they know where all the bodies are buried. And I'll make a comment every once in a while and somebody will correct me and go, no, that's codes, that's not planning. Stuff like that you just don't know. Or some legislation that came up. However, I think that the city administrator is going to be your institutional knowledge moving forward. The professional management will be your institutional knowledge moving forward. And also, most won't remember this. I'm sure nobody remembers this, but I had about a 3-minute speech when I got appointed, and what I said in there, and I believe it based on organizations that I've run and been a part of, which is culture is everything. And good organizations are run by culture, and there is no culture here. And I'll tell you, I also talked about negotiation, I also talked about compromise, and I also talked about building consensus. And, like it or not, there's zero of that comes out of the mayor's office, and you just witnessed that. You may not like some of these people up here, but I'm just telling you,
not only is he now alienated 7, it's now 10 that he's alienated, and he just did that to our consultant for the second time.
Can you stick to the subject that we have here?
Well, so,
That's important.
well, I mean, we get attacked all the time, so.
Healthy turnover is important for.
So that's a long way of saying that as a compromise, and part of negotiation would be that, term limits isn't necessarily a compromise, but term limits with 3 or 4 terms clearly is a compromise. So I don't know that, I won't be here in 10 years. Whether I'm voted out or not, I won't be here in 10 years. So I'll kind of regret that I'm on there as legislative, but on the legislation itself, but I'm going to stick to that. And I do believe that in the long term, term limits, maybe 3 term limits is probably the right way to go and probably a good number to stick with. That's a long answer for you.
Got a couple notes out of it.
Alderman Brown, go ahead.
Mr. Robertson?
Yes.
Okay.
Alderman Robertson.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Alderman Brown, for the opportunity. I always try to draft my comments so that I can keep them concise, kind of stick to script. But this is why that I'm voting for this resolution and supporting this resolution tonight. It does appear to me that the people in my ward want to have a voice on this important issue in the governance of our city government. A case in point, the citizens of Gallatin recently voted almost 80% in favor of term limits. I suspect that the citizens of Hendersonville will be much like the citizens of Gallatin. I understand the pros and cons of term limits, but to me, this is too important an issue for our future to foreclose the public from the discussion and from being the final decision maker. The future governance of this city is at issue. I will not debate at this time the merits of term limits. There will be plenty of time for this necessary discussion if this resolution passes. However, in my opinion, the appropriate venue for the debate to debate the merits of this issue is not within these walls, but during the course of an election. I want to be on the right side of history, so I will put my trust in the voters of Hendersonville to make the right decision on this issue, and I will support the motion. I do believe that a healthy turnover of leadership is important for a vigorous and growing organization. So for these reasons, again, I'm not debating the merits because all this resolution does is let the people decide this issue. So as a result of that, I'm just going to put my trust in the voters and let them decide this issue. I think every opportunity that we can take as policymakers to listen to the public and give them a voice in their government makes for a stronger democracy. Thank you.
Alderman Robertson, thank you. Alderman Brown.
Good job, Eddie.
You need to talk for a minute?
You're it.
Alderman
Okay.
Edwards.
Well, to answer, thank you, Alderman Robertson, for kind of getting us on track, because I'm not going to advocate one way or another whether tonight, at least, whether or not having term limits is a good idea. I don't think we need to get into the merits, as some of our speakers pointed out, some of their citizens' comments pointed out. We don't need to get into the merits tonight. The only issue tonight is whether or not the citizens should be allowed to vote on this. So my opinion as to whether or not we should have term limits is really irrelevant. It's the only thing tonight is whether or not our good citizens should have that opportunity to vote for term limits. And I did have some speech lined up to read, but our citizens' comments, including Dr. Jordan, were so good. I don't know if I could improve on that, and that gives me faith in our citizens and our voters to be able to make a good decision, including on term limits. I think our voters and our citizens are very well informed. We're not any smarter than any of our voters or citizens. We just happen to raise our hands and for some reason elected to sit up here, and I'm being sarcastic. But I have faith that our voters will make a good decision, and I would be fine living with whatever decision the voters make. But I think that y'all, the voters, all of us should be given that opportunity. So I'm not going to get into the meat and potatoes of it. I did want to kind of have some comic relief here. I read we all need to laugh a little bit, so nobody take offense to this. We're just trying to laugh. It was a post I saw. Mark Twain said, "Politicians and diapers must be changed often, and for the same reason." But don't anybody take offense to that. We're just trying to laugh a little bit. So that's all I have. I hope this goes forward so we can move this in the right direction for our voters to actually be able to make an important decision. I mean, it's very rare that our voters get to actually have a direct impact. They have an indirect impact on voting for us aldermen and mayors, but this is a very limited opportunity to have a direct impact on a very important issue. So I really hope we move forward on this. Thank you very much.
Alderman Edwards, thank you. Alderman Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank all four of you for answering the question, since you're the sponsors. I do disagree a little bit. I do think it is time to talk about merits some. And so I did some research as well, as some of our speakers have said. What I would say is that I appreciate those that are for, and I appreciate those that are against, and I hope we walk out this door tonight, whoever prevails on this vote walks out as a friend of the other one. I had 3 people contact me and asked me to vote for term limits. All 3 of them did. I asked them why they thought term limits was good. That's the same question I asked Darrell just a few minutes ago. 1 answered me and 2 did not. The one that answered me said people tend to vote for the name. They tend to vote for the name. I polled 17 people personally. Just walked up to them and said, hey. Some of them come in the Samaritan Center, saw one on the sidewalk I knew, a couple other folks from our ward, but I polled 17 people, and the question I asked them was, what do you think about term limits? Like you, Beth, I didn't preface it, I just said, what do you think about term limits? Please don't take this wrong, anybody, but I had 2 of them say that one of the aldermen down there, it would be a good way to get rid of him. I had another one said one of the other aldermen down there would be a good way to get rid of him. And there's 3 people said that. That's on that side of the fence. You guys came out okay. little humor there. Okay. 14, after they wanted to know why I wanted to know that, I said, because we're going to vote on term limits in the city of Hendersonville next week. Yes, we are.
Alderman Brown, go ahead. Hold on. Alderman Brown, go ahead.
We're going to vote on allowing the citizens to vote. They said, we don't think that there needs to be term limits in the city of Hendersonville. The ballot box is the limit. Local government should not have term limits, as you are only part-time officials. If any alderman is doing, if my alderman is doing a good job, then does that mean that he or she would be gone? I want to be able to vote on that. Term limits, that's pretty well what those people said. So I would tell you this, that if term limits suggest that the limit knows more than the electorate. Institutional knowledge and experience is worth something. I personally believe it impedes the overall performance of systems, budgets, and staff knowledge. This institutional knowledge, it takes a while, as Mr. Bolt said a while ago, he asked a question the other day about you thought it was in codes and it was actually in planning. It takes a while to learn those things. removes popular leaders that have and are serving their wards. If we have a 35% voter turnout, that 35% voter turnout will speak for the entire city, all 39,000 voters. The voters in Ward 4 may feel that Mr. Bolt or myself should be reelected again. But 35% of those voters, which includes some in Ward 4, includes some in Ward 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6, speak for the people in Ward 4. I'll give you somewhat of an example of how those people feel. No, I won't. I'm not going to go there. If we have term limits, voters have no chance to approve or disapprove. I've heard 3 or 4 times tonight, the voters need the option, the voters need to vote. They vote every 2 years at the ballot box. Every 2 years, the voters vote. I have some information here from the National League of Cities. Anybody familiar with that? National League of Cities. It encompasses all the cities basically in the United States. And it's about term limits, and I just pulled out a few things that I thought fit us well. Although voters nationwide imposed term limits for state legislatures in 1990, most of those efforts did not extend to municipal terms of office. Only a small percentage of cities, roughly 15%, limit the mayoral and the councilor terms. We are one of those small cities. We are one of those cities in that 15%. Term limits may reduce potential abuses of power by incumbents who stay too long in office. Also, limits encourage political participation by newcomers. Conversely, the election process itself already serves as the antidote for long-serving officials who are no longer responsive to citizens. So, if I had not been doing my job, I wouldn't have been elected 4 times. Now, not everybody would agree that I do my job. But the majority did 4 times. Term limits increases the ratio of competitive elections. Term limits can curb the influence of lobbyists. I don't think we have lobbyists, but we do have people lobby us to vote for different things. Term limits result in loss of experience. What is the value of experience? The nation's highest office, the President of the United States, is term limited. Why then are less senior positions in need of more indispensable people? As a practical matter, elected officials have turned to professional managers to augment their roles as decision makers. The savvy professionals are schooled in the operation of government, in the management of finances, and the model of governance. I don't know that we're savvy professionals, but those of us who've been around a while do have some knowledge of how to do some things, get some things done. Term limits remove popular leaders and are thus undemocratic. I'm going to read that again. Term limits remove popular leaders and are thus undemocratic. Term limits negatively affect the types of projects that are undertaken in the city. You all can go to that website. There's a lot of information on the League of Cities. Lots of information. Not just about term limits, but about a lot of things. I personally believe term limits are set at the ballot box. I think voters get to vote on them every 2 years. We'll have an election coming in 2020. Whoever's the incumbents up here, if they run, can run and be voted on. If those folks are voting only for the name, then you need to educate the voters, not give them an opportunity to just vote for somebody different because they're still voting for a name. I think those people that have served well enough in their wards that those people who voted them in will be back to the polls in 2020 to do that again if they so choose to run. The one last thing I would like to read about term limits that came from the information that I gathered is, moreover, term limits are an infringement on the democratic process, as citizens are restricted from selecting a candidate they may see as the most qualified for the position. I do not want us to get into that point, but I believe that. I'll be voting against the resolution simply for those terms that I just mentioned. Thank you.
Alderman Brown, thank you. Alderman Strauss.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Thank you so far for all the debate and discussion. I appreciate serious issue, and I appreciate the concern everyone has shown and the respect everyone has shown. One thing I did want to mention I think has been very unfortunate. It has not been among the members of this board. I haven't really seen any of that. But this discussion has fostered some pretty nasty conversations, though, within the community. We even heard tonight the word corruption used. Now, it was said right afterwards that, well, there's no corruption here, but that term limits can help fight corruption. But we've heard that we're egotistic. We've heard that we had big heads, that we're power hungry, that we're lining our pockets, that we're career politicians. And we just want to make sure, and we'll appreciate so far tonight we've had this debate in such a way that it doesn't hurt the institution for ourselves and people who follow us. I could get into the issues about how going into term limit shifts the power from elected representatives to professional staff, how it can shift it from elected representatives to special interest. It's one of those things, if you have someone who comes before you who wants to do a development and you had experience with them for the last 10 years and you know who you can trust and who you can't trust and what questions they ask, those are pretty important. You don't ask those questions, you don't have that accountability. I want to talk just real briefly. New blood is great. I'm going to tell you, we have 12 aldermen sitting up here tonight. 4 of them, 1/3, joined us last year. I don't think you can find a lot of organizations that have 1/3 of their membership to be just over a year in their tenure. I know when I was in my first few years, I benefited from the advice and counsel and experience of people like Jim Carmack and Ham Frost and Al Sorrell, Joe Skidmore, Jim Carmack. I'd hate to think what decisions I would have made and what those debates would have been if I had not had the wise counsel of these people when we discuss these issues, these very important issues. We here talked about name recognition. I'm going to tell you a different term for name recognition. It's reputation. I knew Pat Campbell's name before he became an alderman because I knew Pat Campbell as someone who serves in this community. Serves the schools, served the parks, serves in the shrine. He was the person that when his sister saw my wife, who had just had surgery on her foot, come in on a walker to vote, because his sister works at the polling place, Pat called me 3 hours later and said, "I'm bringing you a wheelchair." Pat got elected not because of name recognition. He got elected because of reputation. And when we get reelected, we don't get reelected because of the promises that we make. We get reelected because the people who see us know what we've done and trust us to keep doing the same. One thing I did hear tonight, I think does underline some of the debate what I did hear a member of this board say, it's a way to change the direction of the city. I've even seen comment on social media, an advocate for this, and then a member of this board say, "But does it matter to me? Would you mind if I ran again?" And the response was, "No, we're absolutely fine with you." Mr. Brown, I assume that I'm probably at least one of those 2 people you talked about. Someone said they want to get rid of, because I've gotten a lot of votes, but I hadn't gotten them all.
Since you mentioned it.
I have a pretty thick skin. I've developed it over the years. Part of it's from years of service. Some of it is successfully raising teenagers.
Go ahead, Alderman Strauss, hold on one second. Alderman Waters, go ahead.
We've been 30 minutes talking about term limits.
I've been talking for 4.
I asked Alderman Woodcock just 10 minutes ago, before the 30-minute rage here, and I respect Alderman Brown. I really do. But we're talking about term limits tonight for some time, I don't know why. I asked Alderman Woodcock, the first step goes to the state, they amend the charter, and comes back as a referendum. He said yes. That's what we ought to be talking about.
You're asking me to keep the conversation on that. Okay.
Why are we talking about term limits?
Point of order.
Your point of order.
Point of
I'm not-
order.
What is the point?
What do you mean point of order?
Alderman
What is
Waters,
the point?
I believe your point of order is for me to ask the members of the board to stay on topic.
I'm staying on topic, sir.
No, I believe you're asking me to make sure that the other members stay on topic.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I appreciate that. I agree with you fully. Thank you. Alderman Strauss.
Thank you. We have been speaking for about 30 minutes, but I've been speaking for 4. And I'm going to close up on my point here. It is very important we discuss the merits of it tonight. Extremely important that we discuss the merits of it tonight. Because if we pass this, we put in process the first step towards removing the choice of voters. Mr. Brown said it. I can't say it better than he did. But voters choose every 2 years. By this time next year, if 7 of us want to be back up here again, 7 of us will face the voters and be reelected. If we put this in place, we are not giving choice to the voter. We are taking away choice from the voter. It takes away potentially my choice to reelect Mr. Campbell. But here's even more important. It allows me, if I vote for this, to help take away Ward 3's ability to reelect Mrs. Cunningham. Now let's ask, do people not have the right to elect those people they wish to elect? If you are saying that there are going to be a class of people within our community who will be ineligible to run for office because they had been previously elected to office, are you giving choice to the voter, or are you taking choice away? Because if everyone in Ward 1 loves Mrs. Petrelli and Mr. Skidmore, but this referendum passes by 50% in one vote, the people in Ward 1 would never be able to elect them again, depending on what terms we put. Or they would never be able to elect someone 3 times or 4 times to get the experience that they appreciate. This is about taking away choice. It is about some groups of people trying to affect other elections. And I will tell you, Mayor, I would like to ask that the rules about comments from the audience be applied fairly and equitably. We had to have some folks escorted out last week when...
We had nobody escorted out.
Well, we had someone asked not to come back in.
Is that true?
Yes.
Well, then let's apply the rules.
Alderman Strauss, go ahead.
That's what I have to say. I only wanted to address this because I think that we need to explain our positions when we vote on this, and if I did not, someone would explain it for me. But I will say that I have been elected 5 times. All 5 times, I have had an opponent. I ran for an open seat. Actually, when I got into the race, the person who held the seat decided not to run for re-election. All 5 times, I had an opposition that was well-funded, with good organizations behind it. And in my last election, term limits was actually a discussion. Mr. Waters' son was the other candidate in Ward 2. And he was sitting in this chair, and I was sitting in this chair in a debate when we talked about term limits, because he made a big deal that I had been elected 4 times. And I'll finish by saying what I said that night. It's not my fault that I was elected 4 times. All I did was put my name on the ballot because my wife said it was okay. The people of Ward 2 made that choice, and I'm not going to criticize them for that. I've had an opponent who's outspent me 2-to-1, nearly 3-to-1 one year. I would rather the people of my ward and every ward have the power of each ward to decide their own representatives in their own elections, as opposed to their choices being taken away by a one-time referendum and a one-time majority of everyone in the city. Thank you.
Alderman Sprouse, thank you. Alderman Edwards.
Oh, we might, is it, I think.
Alderman Edwards. Alderman Waters, we'll get you in a minute.
Alderman Woodcock, does he want?
Well, Alderman Woodcock has spoken once already.
Okay, well, I meant to say this a minute ago. If this does go through, I'm not going to vote for anything less than 3 full terms if this goes forward. So, if this goes, and we have to, I assume we would decide that later after it goes to the General Assembly, what would go to the referendum. I wouldn't vote for anything less than 3 full terms to go on referendum later, so.
Alderman Edwards, thank you. Alderman Woodcock.
Thank you. To Alderman Brown, I was really quick on your question because I didn't want to, give away what I'm about to say. And to me, this issue is 2 independent issues within one. One is, why do I support term limits as a person? Fresh blood. The reason I'm voting for this resolution and putting all this work into it is because of the people being able to vote on it. If the referendum was not part of this, I would never have brought it up. I would have never supported it. And I'm afraid that those that are speaking against this, they're seeing this issue from this seat, not that seat. And here's what I mean by that. I've heard, I'm doing a great job, see, I get reelected, these votes count. But I'm not going to let those voters vote to see if they want to limit me, because, they don't want to do that. But I'm not going to give them the chance. And then the next sentence is, but, we only have 35% participation, so that's not a lot. But then the next speaker talks about how they've been elected so many times and how important it is. So see this from the other seat. I can appreciate all of the terms that people have served, but this is not about our terms that we have already had. This is not fixing a problem. This is not trying to eliminate or remove anyone. It's not for me. Maybe you get on social media and you find someone that's negative and you go with it, but that's not where this is coming from. I've also heard that most local governments do not have term limits. And I started to ask a few people, what they felt about term limits, but I quickly realized it was like the teacher asking the students right before a test what they thought of that teacher. They know we're aldermen. So you're asking them, do you want to remove me from office? Most people don't like confrontation. Therefore, they're not going to give you an honest answer. That's why we go into secret ballot rooms and vote without people standing over us. If you actually want to know what your voters think on the issue of term limits for our position, allow them to vote on it. If less than majority agree with you and they don't want us to have term limits, they will vote no, and this will never move forward. If the majority does want us to have term limits, it'll move forward. I mean, that's why I thought this was going to be so simple with the referendum. I thought that would be the piece that would bring us all together because the people are deciding it. There's no way to spin it. There's no way to maneuver it. The people either want it or they don't. And then it's not magically going to be 80% of every other ward except one. I mean, that's just not realistic. And study after study shows if you give the voters the chance, they will vote for term limits. It's across the board. I've heard that this restricts freedom. I've never in my life heard the definition of freedom including a restriction. Here's your freedom, but we're not going to let you vote on it. True freedom is allowing the citizens to decide on something. It's not telling them the decision that we've made. It's allowing them the opportunity to express their opinion via vote. And democracy, that's been brought up. I can kind of feel the room, and this may be a dying effort, but I will gladly fall on this sword with this last couple of sentences. If you type in the word democratic process, the definition for democracy will come up. Democracy is a form of government in which the people have the authority to choose their governing legislation. Who people are and have authority is shared among them are core issues for democratic development and constitution. The people created us. The people created the term length. And the people, statistically, are saying, hey, if we would have known how this is going, we would have had term limits when we created you. This is their way of going back and doing that. I beg you to see this from the people's standpoint and allow them the opportunity to decide that. I'm up for any discussion on the length of term. I've heard all kinds of things turn around, 3 terms, 4 terms. I've heard a discussion about runoff elections. I'm happy to work with anyone to try to make this work. I started at 2 terms, dead fast. That's all I wanted. And discussion led me to agree that 3 terms is best. So I'm open to compromise if anyone is willing to discuss that. Thank you.
Alderman Woodcock, thank you. I've got Alderman Hayes and Alderman Waters and Alderman Bolt. Alderman Hayes.
Thank you, Mayor. Just want to make about a handful of points. Everybody that I spoke to or asked or I got emails from and I talked to them, I would ask them, what do you think about term limits? And every single one of them said, I'm all for term limits. But there's a caveat. They all want term limits on your guy, not their guy. I think the reason that is such a popular buzzword is that, especially when we look at Washington, D.C., we want to see some term limits. We'd like to see the war chest that's up there be changed around. We don't want them to be able to run and run and run. So the caveat is, when you ask them, well, how come those people keep getting reelected in your area? Well, because they're good guys and they're different. I want your guys to be term limited, not my guys. That's the reason people keep getting reelected. It's because they're being voted in. The second point. My conservative friends say this is government overreach. Please don't tread on me telling me who I can't vote for. You're limiting my choices. Don't tread on me. Point 3. Many people told me we already have term limits. It's called elections. Point 4. If the people in one ward think their aldermen are doing a good job and they choose to keep electing them, I strongly believe they should have the right as long as they choose to do so. And then 5, you can beat an incumbent. I've been a part of campaigns and we have beat incumbents. There are at least 2 people up here on this board that beat incumbents to get up here. Here's the deal. You gotta want it. And you gotta want it bad. I wanted to be up here. I knocked on doors. I raised money. I spent my own money. It's hard work. It's real hard work. When I went to get my petition signed, my next door neighbor, Raymond, says, why in the world do you want to do this? It's a good question. There's no war chest up here. It's a civil servant. The career is in service above self. I worked so hard to get up here. I got to tell you, too, the things that we've dealt with just here tonight, even if we had the institutional knowledge of an administrator, I'm telling you, I need these elected people up here to help guide me through the maze that we went through tonight. So, I got to tell you, some of the folks that have been up here a while, they are awesome. And they are able to coach me when I need it, but I also make my own decisions. Last but not least, and this is how I voted on everything in this past year, I'm voting my heart tonight. Thank you.
Alderman Hayes, thank you. Alderman Waters.
Thank you, Mayor.
I've got to say, I love this guy here. He can say more in 5 minutes than some on his book can say in an hour. He gets to the point. He makes you understand. Let me ask, Mayor, if I may ask Alderman Woodcock a question. As I discussed a while ago, tonight we're talking about voting to send this to the state for the amendment on our charter. How long will it take for them to come back and tell us yes or no?
Quick, it could be a few months.
A few months? Does that mean it's going to be that long before we can vote, number two? Once they approve it and send it back, the board votes on the actual legislation, it could be a month, 2 months?
Yeah, but we have to wait for them to go into session and vote on it.
You think it'll vote this year?
Yeah.
They will?
Yeah.
So we ought to know something.
Oh, this will happen if it passes.
No, I know.
This will be on the November ballot.
Now, I bragged on you, don't get ahead of me. If the state, you said that they'll vote on this year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's going to come back to us. Then we're going to vote on the actual legislation.
Right.
Okay. That's when we ought to be talking about term limits. At that time, what we want to talk about now tonight, and I'm beginning to wonder, does this board want to send it to the state? I would hope they would want to send it to the state and find out what they want us to do. And then when it does come back and we vote on the actual legislation, that's when we want to talk about term limits. You're going to serve another term. I'm going to serve another term.
I am not serving another term.
That's my buddy. But we spent so much time talking about in term limits, and again, this is not the time to talk about that, I don't think, because let's hope it comes back from the state, and then we're going to talk 3 or 4 hours about term limits. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Waters. Alderman Bolt.
Yeah, I'd like to apologize for losing my cool. That's uncool. But I'd like to call a question.
We have a motion and a second to call the question. All those in favor? We have one person in the queue. We have a motion and a second to call the question. We need to take a vote on that. That requires 2/3 vote. We have somebody in the queue. All those in favor of calling the question, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed, please say no. No. Alderman Skidmore, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I've thought about this. This is probably my second time through this. A lot of people don't know I was 22 when I was first elected. Now look how, now I have gray hair and glasses and,
But you got
or
hair.
23, I'll take 23.
But you got hair. I'll take it.
Yeah, my hair. You can have my hair. But my mother started in 1985, I guess it was, with John Bradley. 86, and I think I came in 87. I've represented, I guess I'm the only alderman up here that's represented 2 districts, Ward 1, and I love the people of Ward 1, and I have a very fond of Ward 3, because I served them for many, many years. And they're great people. And then as a whole, as Hendersonville, I love this town. It's been my life. And not because of the money, or even for my mother. It's because we have a civil servant type family. Dad was a fighter pilot in the United States Air Force, was a colonel, came back here to Hendersonville and was the first emergency. They didn't even have police officers or fire chiefs back then, and Dad was the first one. A lot of people don't even know that, and I never even talk about it. Very, very little do I ever talk about that. But we have a civic mind, at least in my family, and I've heard it all too. I'm not a big, and you've heard me say this 1,000 times, I'm not a big Facebook guy, but I'll have people that look, because I am an elected official, and so they'll call me and say, oh, by the way, did you hear this? No, that's fine. I mean, everybody has a right to feel the way they do. And I've always said that I may not agree, and you all have heard this on this board, I may not agree with what you say, but I'll always, always defend your right to say it. Whether it be at a ballot box, will it be at this podium right here, which is the most powerful podium in the city of Hendersonville. I'm telling you, right there, that thing right there. It's not here. It's right there. And at the ballot box. So the question I've been through is the city administrator. You all know how I feel about that. I've been through that. I was here in those wars, and you've all heard me preach about that. But my family was here during those times, and it was rough, and it was tumble. Dave Lamar, you were here back in those days. And it was not pretty for a while. But you know what? We all recovered from it. The city is a very powerful spiritual city within it's a family-oriented community, and I've always loved that. And I've lived a lot of places and things like that, but I always come back home because this is where my home is. And so when term limits this time around came up, I think Angie Hedberg had an ordinance that came up several years ago when she was on the board. It might not be several years ago, but it's been, let's just say 4. I considered that one. But I want to tell this board something, and I know John knows about it. And I don't know if I know none of the other aldermen do, but back in the late 80s or early 90s, and I can't remember which one it was, but I sponsored the first term limits ordinance in the city of Hendersonville, if you can believe that, and it's on record. And his infinite wisdom, I'll never forget that night. We were at the old city hall, which is the police department now. It was buried so far in committee, they're still looking for it, And I never saw anything, and that was it. And so, I started thinking, well, maybe, as the years went by and re-election came, and I was fortunate and so very blessed in Ward 3 at that time to be elected. I was going, and I started learning more. Howard George, God rest his soul, he was an alderman from Ward 6, a great man. I learned so much from him, how to do things as an alderman, and what, at 23, how to maneuver the system. And I was even on the planning commission. And Charles Kimbrough, believe it or not, was the one who really kind of taught me I didn't know what an R-15 was when I first got on that board, and I was going, how in the world did y'all even place me on there? So it turns out Bradley and them, they didn't want to have that extra Tuesday. They wanted it off, right, John? So they just put me on there, and I learned a great deal. So I'm starting to ramble a little bit like my mother used to sometimes when she was passionate about something. I know she was watching, but it's the truth. But she was, and still is. So the question finally now is tonight about term limits, and I've always been for term limits, always. But it's not for the reasons why that has been spoken tonight. I want to say one thing about, you need new blood and all that. Not really. You need leaders with vision. You need leaders that understand the plight that you have. You need leaders that are understanding. And whether you get them with new or not, you never know. It's like buying a brand new car. You may get a lemon or you may not. And that's the choice that you made when you picked that car out. Well, it's the same for an elected official. You may get on that horse and say, I'm riding him or riding her all the way into the end. And that's going to be my choice. You might get them, and they might. And listen, over the period of 30 years I've been up here, I've served with a lot of people. And I've seen some lemons, and I've seen some diamonds, and including myself on some of those. Like You know, you may say, I didn't do that well that year. I didn't do what I wanted to do because I got sidetracked. But this next year, you know, I'm going to get on something. You give somebody, you have to give an elected official, no matter who they are, whether it's an alderman, and this is just my opinion, but this is of years of experience in civic leadership. You got to give that guy or that woman a chance to lead, to step up and do the right thing. And sometimes those things aren't right. God, I've been, and I know I'm getting off track, but it's there's a point to all this. I can remember, and then I'm going to close with this. The very first time when I ran for office at 23, and I know I see the house in my dreams sometimes, to this day, I knocked on the first door when I was campaigning, and I was, you know how you are at 23. The world cannot stop you, no matter which way the wind is blowing. You're ready to go. And I knocked on the door of this guy, and I said, "Hi, I'm Mark Skidmore." And I reached out my hand, and he looked at me, and he grabbed my little palm card. Now, most of you guys know when I'm talking about a palm card. It's it tells all a little bit about yourself and why you would like to vote, or you want the person to vote for you. And so he looked at me and he said, "Are you Joe Skidmore, any relation to Joe Skidmore?" And that was my mom. And I was like, "Yeah." I said, "Yes, sir, that's my mother." And he said, "You get off this porch and don't come back here, and I will never vote for you if it was the last thing I did." And I just looked at him and I was hurt. And I tell this story to young people when I go speak for them. And he pretty much cussed me a little bit, which, I'm so used to it now up here. I get called everything. But my point is this. I was new and young, too, and I kept pushing. And I think I've done a fairly good job up here. There are things that I have fallen. There are things that breaks my heart, like tonight with us arguing and stuff. That breaks my heart. Because I know everybody believes in what they're saying. But it's the way we sometimes come up here and go about it. I've been very quiet in this last term of office because I want to listen. I want to feel what's going on out in our city, because we have a lot of changes coming on. We've got the city administrator, which, no offense to Dave, I work with him very well, but I did not support it. And now the term limits are here. I have to say I was going to abstain, to be honest with you, on this, because I felt that we all, as aldermen, are too close to this, because you're talking about our respective seat up here. And if term limits had been voted in back in the 90s, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. I would be probably on a beach somewhere, to be honest with you. But it's our civic duty to do what we need to do in this community, and as aldermen. I'm in favor of giving the people the right to vote, to have that choice. I had been on this thing one way or the other. I've been on both ways. I was going to vote for it. I was going to vote against it, because it is the most important thing we have as an American, not only as people in Hendersonville, but as an American, is a right to vote. And I'm certainly not going to give no one, that right away. So you have that right to vote as far as my vote. It may not get to the legislature. There may be 8 or 9 votes up here. It may not. But there's always another day. This may be the first shot that comes to our city. I don't know. But that's how I feel about it. God, you all don't know how long I've, been thinking about this since it first came up. But it's something that as an elected body, we're going to have to address one way or the other. So that's how I feel about it. You voting, one of our aldermen said we're voting with their heart tonight, and I've got to do the same. And I normally try to vote with up here. But tonight, I'm going to vote with my heart tonight. And I thank you, Mayor, for allowing me that time. And I thank the board, because I know they wanted to call the question to allow me to speak on this issue. Thank you very much.
Alderman Skidmore, thank you. Alderman Petrelli.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll keep it very brief, but if we could, if y'all would bear with me here, if everybody could just state how long they've been up here, I think that would be helpful for everybody, starting with Alderman Roberson. Just state how many years you've been up here.
1 year.
Mr. Waters?
He says 8.
One year.
13.
3.
What, your cumulative years serving up here, Mayor?
7.
9.
5.
19.
No, I've been up here 32.
32, and I've been up here 3. So even though we're all nonpartisan up here, I have heard from constituents in Ward 1 who are both strongly Democratic and strongly Republican in nature. I've also heard from self-proclaimed independents and libertarians. I appreciate the intent of Alderman Woodcock's legislation, and for those folks that have spoken with me over these last couple of weeks, I think they knew that I was on the fence. I see merits on both sides of this issue. But in speaking with constituents, both sides have asked that I not limit people's opportunity to vote, because when you voting something that says term limits, limit is innately in there. It's limiting. I greatly appreciate what the speakers said tonight as proponents of term limits, because I struggled with that myself. But in creating a term limit, I have to go with my gut and not vote in a way where we have an arbitrary limit on something just because somebody has served within a time frame that purportedly means that their time is up, whether it's 1 term, 2 terms, or 3 terms. But you are deciding, I'm addressing somebody in the audience who said, let us decide. By voting, that is your opportunity to decide. By putting a term limit on somebody, let's say in 4 years, 10% of the population turns over in our particular ward. And let's say Mark is still alderman in Ward 1 and I'm retired on the beach.
I'll be right behind you.
And Mark has been a dutiful and effective politician, but because of the purported term limit, if that were to pass, those new folks in Ward 1 don't even have an opportunity to vote for him because he needs to move on out the door for 4 years. So I've really struggled with this. I'm not going to belabor it. I appreciate what everybody has said up here. It's been a very difficult conclusion for me to get to, but I think some of the points that were made up here tonight have been very helpful for me, and I appreciate the co-sponsors who have put themselves out there for this. And I know I'm going to get vilified. The majority of the, in addition to getting feedback from my constituents, 2 of them spoke tonight, and they're both polar opposites, like I said, democratically and Republican. But it's not conservative to limit somebody. And, so the feedback that I've gotten from constituents, and then the very brief survey I've taken on social media, the reasons that people want term limits, I mean, I'm just going to be honest, are so incredibly vicious, it makes me wonder what the agenda is. And I'm not saying that agenda reflects on the alderman who signed on to because I think the men that co-signed on this legislation are fine men, and I appreciate them sticking their necks out for this legislation. So with that being said, I cannot support term limits at this time. Thank you.
Alderman Petrelli, thank you. I'm going to turn on everybody's microphone. Again, if this passes just as a majority, it does not go forward. It needs 2/3 of a majority, which was 9 votes, 8 and a fraction for us, which means 9 votes. So please say aye or nay when Kay calls your name. And again, this is Resolution 2019-60.
Woodcock,
Aye.
Waters,
Aye.
Sprouse,
No.
Skidmore,
Yes.
Robertson,
Yes.
Petrelli,
No.
Hayes,
No.
Edwards,
Yes.
Cunningham,
Abstain.
No.
No.
Campbell,
No.
Brown,
No.
Bolt,
Yes.
Clary,
Yes. Make it? No? That fails 7-6. I'm sorry, 7-5 and 1 abstention. We now have a second reading of ordinance 2019-47. This is an ordinance amending the Hendersonville Municipal Code, Title I, Chapter 1, regarding the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, and Chapter 6, standing committees. Alderman Edwards.
So move.
We have a motion
Second.
and a second. Let me turn off your light. Edwards.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to amend this, and I'll pass this out to everybody beforehand. I'll let everybody get to it. What I underlined is the proposed amendments from the first reading. At the first reading, we discussed to accommodate at least one member that we would not start this till March, but I'm proposing that we not start the beginning times of the meetings, which we're just moving them up 30 minutes now, until April 1st, 2020. And so that would just be our meeting starting at 7, and all the committee meetings being moved up 30 minutes, but again, that wouldn't start till April 1st. But, however, I want to effective immediately. I don't know if we can even do it tonight. We can't do it tonight, so effective the next meeting, that the meetings shall go no later than 11 o'clock p.m. unless 2/3 vote to go until midnight, but under no circumstances can we go past midnight. I think one of the speakers, I don't know if it's a citizen's comment or somebody said this, nothing good happens after midnight. There should be no reason why we should go out till midnight. So the end time's effective immediately, at least the next meeting, but the beginning time's April 1st, 2020. That's all I have.
Right now.
Alderman, we have
We'd have to vote
an
9
amendment
votes.
from Alderman Edwards. We have a motion to amend from Alderman Edwards. We have a second. And we have a second. Alderman Sprouse.
I'd like to offer an amendment to the amendment. I appreciate the sentiment of needing to start earlier, but there have been a couple of times that we have been pressed up to midnight and to 1 o'clock. I don't think anyone would argue that the discussion, the deliberation on this board is what pushed us to that time. I'd even argue that we made a better decision on garbage at 2 o'clock in the morning than we did at 8. 4 o'clock in the morning than we did at 1. I don't think we should be here regularly, but I think if we've already been pushed up to that border a couple of times, I offer an amendment to the amendment, or if you would just rather change your original amendment, that the start times move by only a half hour.
The start time's a half hour?
I'm sorry, the ending times move by only a half hour. That we give ourselves the same window that we've practiced under the last few months.
If I may speak.
Go ahead, Alderman Edwards.
What about it will not end, we can't go after 11:30 unless there's a 2/3 vote, and then we can still not go after midnight. We could vote to extend it 30 minutes at 11:30.
Would you make it a simple majority to extend?
That's fine.
Okay. No, let's make it,
I'll
we'll keep it
amend my
2/3. We'll keep
motion.
it 2/3. We'll keep it 2/3. I'm happy with that. If you want to change your amendment, I'll withdraw my amendment to the amendment.
That's fine. So my amendment would include, the meetings shall end no later than 11:30 p.m.
And everything else is the same.
Correct. What's included in the proposed
you, Russ.
amendment that I handed out.
Who
Thank you.
seconded? Did we have, I'm sorry, Kay, do we have a second to that amendment? To Russ's? Okay, thank you. Okay. Alderman Sprouse.
I'm good, thank you.
Okay. Alderman Bolt.
As co-sponsor of this, I'd rather not change that. I'd rather keep it at 11, and maybe we talk shorter. Maybe the meetings will be controlled better. I don't know, but I don't have any desire to go past 11. There's really no reason to, I don't think. So I'd like to keep it at 11. 2/3 gets us to midnight. We're only moving up the meeting time, as it turns out, by 30 minutes. It's not a lot. We ought to be able to finish business in 4 hours. If you ask Gary Jekyll, he'd tell you it's pretty seldom anybody goes past 11 o'clock, if anybody ever does. So you guys can do whatever you want with it. I'm okay, but I really don't see any reason to change the 11 o'clock to 11:30.
Alderman Bolt, thank you. Alderman
We
Petrelli.
already, excuse me, I'm sorry. We already changed from 7:30 to 7, so that was compromise, but I'd like to keep the 11 and 12. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Alderman Petrelli.
Are we on the amendment to the amendment or the main motion?
No, there is not a secondary amendment. There's just an amendment, which you have in front of you, with the change from 11 to 11:30.
Okay, I just want to speak to the main.
Okay?
Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak on the amendment that was proposed by Alderman Edwards? All those in favor of his amendment, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, please say no. No. Let's call the roll. Let me turn on everybody. Hold on here.
Restate that.
Yeah, please.
Okay, I'll restate the amendment. Is my mic on, I guess? Okay,
Yep.
and you should have this in front of you, the underline, the beginning on April 1, 2020, that the beginning times will be 7 o'clock PM. That also applies to moving all the committee meetings up 30 minutes. And until April 1, 2020, we'll continue starting at 7:30, and then all the committee times remain the same. But these meetings shall end no later than 11:30 PM. It's 11:30 is the proposed amendment.
With the 2/3 being at midnight.
Correct. That's part of the original.
Hold on one sec. Alderman Edwards, anything else on that?
No, and if we do 11:30, we can make it effective tonight.
Alderman Bolt, go ahead.
That's a great point.
Hey, I'm sorry, if the amendment fails, do we go back to the main one?
If the amendment fails, we go back to what's on page 15, I believe,
Okay.
of your packet.
Thank you.
Okay. On the amendment? Okay. Alderman Petrelli, go ahead.
Thank you. Okay. So the only thing that I'm concerned about with limiting the meetings to 11 PM is that it's past 11 o'clock right now. My only concern is that we're going to get into a pattern of unfinished business, and then we're going to have another meeting to continue business, and I don't think any of us up here have that level of flexibility in their, I mean, they might, but I know that some folks up here are concerned about even pushing it back because they've got family obligations. So I would prefer to stay an extra half an hour to an hour and get her done than have to push off into a special called meeting the next day. Because that also is going to call out our police, and our employees. It creates an undue burden, but I appreciate the intent. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Petrelli. Alderman Woodcock.
I may be in the minority, but I've always thought the 2/3 vote to extend has been stupid. It took me years to realize why we were doing that, because everyone would always vote yay and we would continue. I feel the same way, that I would rather stay another 15, 20 minutes and get it done and not have to leave. So if I had my way, I would either not have a ending limit or say at midnight, no matter what, we're done. No 2/3 vote. I mean, if it's important, we'll stay. If it's not, we shouldn't be discussing it anyway. That would solve a lot of waste of time on fake votes to extend. So I would make that amendment if I'm not alone. I'm seeing a lot of shaking heads, so maybe I'm not in the minority, but I would rather see ending time of midnight, no vote, just we end at midnight.
Second. Alderman Woodcock, thank you. Alderman Sprouse.
We have to be very careful here. Because if we have a hard end time to this meeting, we open ourselves up to the gamesmanship of clock management. And we have seen it. There has been a pattern that if there is one controversial issue on the board, on our agenda, there may be very well a second and we spend an hour and a half on one, and we're worn out and spend 15 on the second. We have seen, I love the community presentations and that the way that we have the ability to celebrate all of the community. But we've had a presentation when we had a pretty controversial package in at our last meeting. We had a 20-minute presentation about online safety. And so the thing I'm really concerned about is that I think that we should have some start time, but what we have found is, with the practice that we have, is that we have a stop time that requires a 2/3 vote, and that's essentially like in football, the 2-minute warning. We're then given either 30 minutes or we're given an hour. Right now, we currently have an hour that says, here's what the rest of the agenda is, and we move through it pretty quickly, or we prioritize and say, these are 3 things that we can push off for 2 weeks, and we work on only what has to be done. I don't want to have a situation that we're looking at a clock, waiting for someone to have a vote, and someone's trying to run the clock out so that vote doesn't happen.
Alderman Sprouse, thank you. Alderman Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. I think the amendment right now that Alderman Edwards is at 11:30. It's a hard 11:30, unless we have a 2/3 vote.
Correct.
Okay.
Go to midnight.
Okay. I don't have a problem with 11 and/or 11:30. I'm not too big on the 2/3. I agree with Darrell on that. What I am concerned about is what Ms. Petrelli talked about, that we're in the middle of a discussion. And here comes time to stop, and we stop. So, and for lack of better terms, maybe you lose your momentum in that discussion, and you have to come back, and 2 weeks, you can't remember exactly what was said, and, it's not, you have to watch the film to catch up. So is there any way in your amendment, I can go with the 11 or 11:30, strike the 2/3 vote, but put in there that we will extend, the meeting will automatically extend to complete any business that we are discussing. John, help me. Like an ordinance or resolution, that particular, if we're in the middle of one resolution, that we'll finish debate on it and get done with it. I guess I'm asking you,
Alderman Edwards.
Well, so that is, are we only talking, if we're in the middle of discussing that particular
that
ordinance?
particular item, like just this right here, if we're in the
Yeah, that
middle
would
of
be
discussion, we just automatically go on to finish this ordinance instead of stopping and put it on the next agenda.
I mean, I'd be fine with that. I would like to hear what other people thought of that.
Okay.
And that's at 11:30, right? If we get to 11:30, are you saying?
When we get to 11:30, if we're in the middle of this,
Yeah.
that we automatically just go on and finish it instead of stopping in the middle of it in debate and adding it to 2 weeks.
About midnight.
This doesn't have what I'm talking about has no time frame on it. It's just till we finish it, which might be 5 minutes, might be 50 minutes. But it's hard to stop in the middle of a debate and then bring it back again in 2 weeks.
I'd like to hear what Alderman Sprouse has to say, because I'm the one who agreed to what he had proposed. I don't want to go back on that. I want to
Is
hear
it
what
okay
he
if I
has.
take the floor?
Alderman Sprouse.
I'll defer to you.
I think the system that we've put in place a few months ago has been helpful. That there is a time at which we have to say, if we're going to continue, we have to agree to continue. And by that vote, we then agree, really in spirit, that in the next hour, we're going to get down to business and get through it. I'm concerned that if we have a hard stop, and even that hard stop allows us to continue the discussion that's at hand, if we were under similar rules tonight, we would probably not be able to get to first reading of an ordinance appropriating funds for the designs and drawings of Fire Station 7. I wouldn't like to be the one to go to Chief Bush and say, we'll get that next month, or in this case, we'll get that next year. I think that I had my doubts about the system, and I think Mrs. Petrelli was the one who originally proposed it. I had some doubts about that system. I think we've only had to enact it twice, but both times it worked pretty well. And I'd hate to throw that to the curb, because here's the thing. If we don't want to extend the discussion, all you have to do is just say, no, I don't want to vote to extend the discussion. And it doesn't take very many people saying no for us to all go home. So my concern is, let's make the change. I appreciate Mr. Edwards asking. Let's make the change, the shift forward, but let's keep the system that we have in place the same. The windows the same, the time the same, the process the same. And if we find that that doesn't work, then we can come back and adjust it later.
Alderman Sprouse, thank you. Any other discussion?
Well, to answer Alderman Brown's question, I tend to agree with Alderman Sprouse. I'd like to stick with what I had originally proposed. If you wanted to make an amendment, I'd consider that, but I'll stick with my original proposed amendment.
We have a motion.
call for the
We have a
question on the
motion to
amendment.
call the question on the amendment.
All right.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion, a second to call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say no. That passed unanimously. Now we need to take a vote on the amendment, which is what Alderman Edwards gave you, with an additional, instead of 11, additional adjustment, instead of 11, 11:30. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye when Kay calls your name. Those opposed, please say no. Let me turn your microphones. That includes, yes, the two-thirds to go to midnight. You just called the question, though, so we can't move, we have to vote on this. We have to vote on this.
So, can you repeat the motion?
Sure.
What we're voting
So what Alderman Edwards handed out earlier,
Yes.
which is ordinance 2019-47, but go to the first, the paragraph that is 1-101. Midway through that paragraph, cross out 11 and make it 11:30. That's what we're voting on, the 11:30 as well as the whole thing in front of you, which is an amendment. When Kay calls your name, please signify by saying aye or no.
Vote.
Oh,
Aye.
I got it, yeah.
Brown.
Aye.
Campbell.
Aye.
Cunningham.
Aye.
Edwards.
Aye.
Hayes.
Aye.
Petrelli.
Aye.
Robertson.
Aye.
Skidmore.
We've had such a hard time tonight. I'll go aye.
Sprouse.
Aye.
Waters.
Aye.
Woodcock.
Aye.
Clary.
Aye. We're back on the main motion. Alderman Petrelli, that passes unanimously, I believe. Alderman Petrelli.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, so bear with me here. I'm going to try to keep it brief because we're at 11:15. A couple of things come to mind with these meetings running long, and I'm not blaming anybody, but I'm going to cite examples from tonight. Tonight, we spent approximately 25 minutes discussing the recycle RFP because we were not made aware of it. If that had maybe come forward to us earlier, maybe we would not have had so many questions about it and confusion. We even had a citizens talking about it, so 25 minutes. Then we spent 40 minutes discussing the validity of the interim CA when if simply we had let the two experts speak, our MTS representative and our attorney, we could have more quickly got to the bottom of that, say, let's go with 20 minutes. Then in the first half of the meeting, we spent 10 minutes debating adding something to the agenda. So that's between 75 and 90 minutes. That's an hour and a half, okay? So we would be at 9 o'clock right now, let's say 9:30. So basically, some of these things come down to agenda management. I'm not saying that any of these issues did not warrant the time spent being discussed on them, but when you throw in, 3 items that, one of which shouldn't have even been discussed, but this should have been approximately 7 to 8 minutes, and we spent 75 to 90 minutes discussing that. And then somebody cited our last meeting with presentations. I think we had a pretty loaded agenda, and we had several presentations. So I would like to make an amendment to help with agenda management that the only thing that I can see that can be controlled here is presentations, because we cannot control our, spontaneous discussions on items that we've just become aware of. So maybe with presentations, because those are important, if presentations are, we limit it to one presentation, and then all other presentations, I think the last meeting we had 3 or 4, we moved those to the 3rd Tuesday of the month. And those presentations can be made on camera because those folks, and events and other items need to be recognized, and that gives those folks an opportunity to be recognized on television, also gives aldermen an opportunity to come if they're available, but it could save anywhere from a half an hour to an hour in getting all of this time trimmed up, this precious time that we don't have. So I'm going to ask for an amendment to move 2 or more presentations to the third Tuesday of the month, if that makes sense.
Do we have a motion?
What did I say? Our meetings are the second and the fourth.
You're giving them to the planning commission.
No, the planning commission is what, Daryl, the first? No, it's just the first.
Hold on. Alderman Petrelli, anything else? We have a motion.
I have a question for Alderman Woodcock. When I was on planning, we never met on a Thursday. Do you guys ever meet?
Yeah, it's technically on the calendar, but we've met once, and that was a study session for the code, or the planning.
A
Yes,
special call, yeah.
I'm
Well, I
tired.
would say the rarity of those meetings would allow the opportunity to move presentations to that third Tuesday, and if it doesn't work for that particular month, then so be it. I'm just trying to get to some type of agenda management. I mean, we've brought up agenda management for months now, and I think it's kind of, I think agenda management would help with some of our times. And if you guys support it, great, and if you don't, that's okay too. Not going to hurt my feelings. I'm just trying to come up with ideas here. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Petrelli. Alderman Edwards.
I do appreciate that, and I like where you're going with this, Alderman Petrelli. I wonder if we should at the beginning of the year, try to look at all of our agenda management and come up with some kind of resolution to address, perhaps with the, not the citizens' comments, what am I trying to say? The public hearings or the presentations, we could have those limited in time instead of moving them to a different day, perhaps 5 or 10 minutes. I just wonder if we should kind of take an entire look at it comprehensively and try to take an entire change of the agenda after the beginning of the year and not address it in this resolution. Because I would be
Sure.
on board with limiting in time the presentations.
Okay, yep, as long as we revisit it either through an ordinance, through legislation or a workshop. I don't know if the mayor has a workshop scheduled, but I will
Right.
withdraw. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alderman Robertson, thank you, Alderman Edwards. Alderman Cunningham.
Thank you, Mayor. Also, Alderman Petrelli, if you would consider just what Alderman Edwards had suggested about the limiting time for the presentations, also limiting time for the public hearings, and also limiting time, if at all possible, for the committee reports. But that might get touchy at that point. If there's, and then we could extend the time for committee reports if we vote on it, to extend the time. So that might be something that we might all want to bundle together after the first of the year to make better use of our time. Thank you, Mayor.
Alderman Cunningham, thank you. Alderman Strauss.
Thank you, Mayor. I will commit to bringing this discussion to the general committee, even if we need to have some extra time on that meeting to have that discussion. One thing I'll also point out too, I think the committees always have a right to set their meeting times. If you find that there's some conflict, if you're on a committee, then if any members of the committee want to come back and amend this, I would support that, except I'm really happy with when general committee meets. But I want to give a word of caution. We cannot legislate a solution to every situation that we're in, because then when we do, we create new problems. Yes, it's unfortunate when we have sometimes an hour-long committee report that really isn't a report from that committee, but it's kind of open mic discussion of issues that should be discussed at a future committee meeting. But I remember not too long ago, Mrs. Cunningham giving a pretty in-depth and very important Finance Committee report that needed to be given, information that needed to be conveyed to the entire board and the people to whom we were responsible. So I will commit to having that discussion, but sometimes when you got a broken system, you can fix the system, and sometimes you can over-fix it and cause too much trouble We just have to be aware of where we are and see what we can do ourselves to help when we're going through the meetings. Thank you.
Alderman Sprouse, thank you. All those in favor of ordinance 2019-47 as amended, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say no. That passed unanimously. Next, we have, can't start it. Next, we have second reading of ordinance 2019-48. This is an ordinance amending the Henderson Municipal Code, Title 8, Chapter 2 regarding beer. Alderman Edwards.
Oh, so moved.
Motion and a second. All those in favor of second reading of ordinance 2019-48, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say no. That passes unanimously. Now we have second reading of ordinance 2019-50. This is an ordinance accepting a federal grant and amending the budget ordinance 2019-22 by appropriating $10,025.23 for bulletproof vests for the police department. Alderman Brown. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of second reading of ordinance 2019-50, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. That passes unanimously. Next, we have second reading of ordinance 2019-51. This is an ordinance amending budget ordinance 2019-22 and accepting the State of Tennessee Department of Transportation Tennessee Highway Safety Grant in the amount of $20,500 for the Hendersonville Police Department. Alderman Brown. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of second reading of ordinance 2019-51, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. That passes unanimously. Now we have second reading of ordinance 2019-54. This is an ordinance contracting the municipal limits of the city of Hendersonville, Tennessee on Big Station Camp Creek Boulevard. We have a motion and a second. I need to bring up something. The first time I saw the proposed, this is not my proposal, what you see with red. This is not my proposal, even though it has my name on it. The first time I saw it was when it was set in front of me. I have a hard time with making a amendment to an ordinance that I propose when I've just seen it. However, the changes are just in the whereas paragraphs. They're not in the enacting paragraphs. They're just in the whereas paragraphs. They're not in the actually enacting paragraphs. What we're actually taking, well, the action we're actually taking begins with now therefore. The action we're taking. Again, I have a hard time with this because the ordinance that I suggest is what you got in your packet. What was set on my table includes this with my name on it. I did not write that.
We understand. What do you want to do? Just clarification of the definition?
Hold on one second. Let's go to Alderman Robertson first.
Well, I noticed that our city attorney has not signed this revised one as for the legal form. Have you reviewed this, Mr. Bradley, this revised one?
I've read it. I saw it tonight. It was the first time I saw it. But, the whereases are not even part of it. I see no reason to amend it to include that. The way we've got, the way the mayor had it works, it does what we're trying to do. I don't see any reason to put any more whereases in it than we already have.
Mayor, who added this whereas? Do you know?
I believe former Mayor Scott Foster. Do you want us to suspend the rules?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
Let's hear from.
We have a motion and a second. Without objection, we're to suspend the rules to hear from Mayor Scott Foster.
Hello
there. Hold on one second.
Mayor,
all those in favor of suspending the rules to hear from Scott Foster, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say no.
And let me ask.
Go ahead.
Mayor, I hope that you're being paid by the hour, with this client. So, explain to us the purpose and the reason why this is necessary.
All right, I've rewritten this thing 3 times. So we're back to where we started. Here's the deal. You guys are contracting the city limits to the west side of Big Station. That's the phase 1 I need done. That whereas in the red is the Urban Growth Boundary Committee has to meet and change the urban growth boundary to the west side of Big Station. Otherwise, I'm still in the Hendersonville planning region. I still have to submit plans to both Hendersonville and Gallatin. Hendersonville wants something on Big Station, Gallatin wants something completely different on Big Station. We're about to start this project. It's probably a $25 million project. I've got to get at some point the Urban Growth Boundary Committee has to meet and change the city limits. You guys contracting the city limits is okay, but it's phase 1. The next phase is, I got the urban growth boundary moved to meet your city limit. So I could ask for annexation into Gallatin on Big Station Camp, and we can ask you guys to annex Sonersville Road North, the 7 lots that we've got on Sonersville Road North. My guys won't move forward with that Sonersville Road North until we can get the rest of Big Station into Gallatin.
So you think this whereas will motivate Gallatin Planning Commission to approve it? Is that?
I hope so.
That's the hope of this whereas, to kind of put the burden that, hey, this is the next step?
Yeah, you guys have done everything that we've asked you to do. We just need a little help with the Urban Growth Boundary Committee meeting.
I have no further questions.
Okay. Any other discussion? All those in favor of accepting second reading of 2019-54, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say no. That passes unanimously. Next, we have first reading of 2019-55. This is an ordinance amending the budget ordinance 2019-22 by appropriating general funds up to $100,000 for the design and drawings for Fire Station Number 7. Alderman Brown?
I would move, Mayor, but I also would respectfully ask to add Alderman Robertson and Alderman Waters as sponsors, and this is in their ward, and they would like to do that, so.
Without objection, I think we can do that.
Second.
Alderman Brown, okay, so we have a motion and a second. Alderman Skidmore.
Yeah, thank you, Chief. Actually, a couple questions on it. Basically, just one, actually, but there may be others that want to.
Yes, sir.
Reading this ordinance, 1955, are you good with it?
Yes,
Is there
sir.
anything that needs to be added or taken away, or?
No, so we spoke to a couple of different independent, just kind of, not professionally or guaranteeing anything about what it would cost to get Station 7 drawing started.
Right.
And both of them quoted around $100,000.
Okay. That's all I needed from you. Appreciate your work you do and your team.
Thank you.
Alderman Skidmore, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
All those in favor of first reading of ordinance 2019-55, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. That passes unanimously. Now we have resolution 2019- I'm sorry?
I'm just thanking you for that vote.
We have resolution, I thought you were abstaining, I apologize. We have resolution 2019-57. This is a resolution to declare equipment owned by the city to be surplus property and directing disposal of that property. Alderman Bolt. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of resolution 2019-57, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. That passes unanimously.
Group I, J, and K.
Item I has been withdrawn. We have a motion to group items J and K. We have a motion and a second to group J and K. All in favor of grouping items J and K, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. We're going to have to call the roll to group items J and K. All those in favor of grouping J and K, please say aye when K calls your name. Those opposed, please say no. Go ahead.
Vote.
What am I voting on?
Whether we should group items J and K.
J and K.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes.
Campbell.
Yes.
Cunningham.
No.
Edwards.
Yes.
Hayes.
Yes.
Petrelli.
No.
Robertson.
Yes.
Skidmore.
No.
Sprouse.
No.
Waters.
No.
Woodcock. Clary.
No.
Okay. That's fine. I know one.
That fails 6-7. Now we have reading resolution 2019-62. This is a resolution transferring $30,000 appropriating the ordinance 2019-22 to provide renovations to the tennis facility. Alderman Bolt.
So moved.
Motion and a second. Let me turn off everybody so you can turn yourselves back on. Hold on here. Is there anybody wishing to discuss this? All those in favor of resolution 2019-62, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. That passes unanimously. Now we have resolution 2019-64. This is a resolution amending the job classification list and pay tables. I so move. Motion and a second.
All those in favor of Resolution 2019-64, please, I'm sorry, Alderman Skidmore?
Can you kind of tell me what's proposed here? I mean, I just think we need to go for the record
Okay.
and put it on, what this is all about.
Okay.
For the budget.
Probably best done by our finance director.
Okay. So he's saying that the court clerk, there you are, wasn't even looking, sorry. You'd have been a spotter, you'd have got me. Go ahead and let us know a little bit what you're proposing here this evening.
Sure. This is to.
Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome.
Peter and I in personnel, we spoke with our pay consultant, and this is to more adequately, this is to regrade our court clerk to a more adequate step and range based upon the work, the job description. This is also providing us a hierarchy to have the supervisory capabilities added into the court clerk position. So the deputy court clerk will now answer to the court clerk. It will provide me with a little more succession planning in that case. Definitely more of a structure and a hierarchy in the finance department, but also the current court clerk has been here for many, many years and been in that position, and I think we all probably know who we're talking about, but she's taken on more and more duties and as over the years. Absolutely. And I just will add a note that it may be for future years, but in this year, there's no cost provided for that, so.
I got you.
Robert, thank you. Alderman Skidmore, anything else?
You'll just add this into next year's budget, right, this process, and then we'll.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Robert, thank you. Alderman Skidmore, thank you.
Oh, thank you, sir.
All those in favor of Resolution 2019-64, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed, please say no. That passes unanimously. Now we have a vote on the reappointment of Mary Jane Campbell to serve on the Beer Board. Alderman Petrelli. Motion and a second. All those in favor of reappointing Mary Jane Campbell to serve on the Beer Board, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed, please say no. That passes unanimously. Next, we have consideration of canceling the December 24, 2019 meeting. We have a motion and a second. I'm sorry, did you want to speak, Alderman Waters? I'm sorry. Oh, sorry, okay. So we have a motion and a second to cancel December 24th, 2019 Board of Mayor and Alderman meeting. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed, please say no. That passed unanimously. Next, we have a motion to adjourn. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed, please say no. We're adjourned. Thank you, Jeff.